Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto was a devil Heir part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Lord Gresin Asmodai lay in his bed, knowing without rancor that he was finally dying. He didn't know just how long he would linger, but he was content. He would finally rejoin his beloved bride who passed from him some centuries before. He could rest knowing that he had accomplished much in his nearly 4,500 years of life. He had seen a great deal, from the Great War with the Heavens, to the later civil war amongst his own kind when the corrupt and arrogant old Satan faction needed to be brought down. He had even participated in that battle, himself bringing about the deaths of nearly 20 legions under the command of the then current Leviathan despite holding the title of Asmodeus, the original founder of his house, at the time. No, the old devil had no regrets about any of that. If he had to give one, it would be that his house would end with him. His only son and daughter had both perished in that same civil war, and his only wife, the one woman he would ever bring himself to copulate with, had died only a few short centuries ago. So with his death his house and name would be removed from among the registry and the pillars, which would put all of his servants out in the streets of the underworld without jobs. Oh, they could seek employment elsewhere, as some had already done, but those who had remained loyal to him, they were a different story. Gresin was a charitable soul, and he did not want to know that he had left such loyalty unrewarded. Much like his old friends of the Gremmy house, he, too, cared greatly for those who served him. It would be a smear upon his name in his last hour to leave them without some form of compensation. So he had called his people together in his mansion's great hall, and asked of them their opinion. He was surprised, to say the least, that they each said they would rather follow him to the grave than serve outside his bloodline. So he hatched a plan with them. He now waited against time for their findings. Then the door opened, and the two youngest of his loyal maids entered. Both looked to be in their late to mid-teens, and were obviously sisters. Has it been found then, Melanie? Yes, Master Gresin. The subject has all the particulars you have asked for, Melanie replied. She was a quiet girl, and had customized her uniform in white with light blue accents. Her twin sister, Militia, was just as quiet, but had the longer hair, and patterned her uniform in black and red. The two were utterly inseparable. They had been human together, and they became devils together, even going so far as to continue to share a bed even now. Gresin had rescued them from a collapsing world that had reached its potential end, and in return he was rewarded with their loyalty. He would not see that loyalty betrayed now. Very good, he was interrupted by a sudden coughing fit that wrenched its way from within his emaciated frame. He regarded his now frail body with a certain amount of amusement. Devils were powerful beings, with bodies that could take and dish out great amounts of punishment, but when their time came to die of old age, those same bodies suddenly became as frail as any century-old human, and he was indisputably the oldest living devil. Shall we commence with obtaining the subject, Master? Militia asked. Yes, Militia. Bring me our hope. The two girls bowed and retreated from the room. Gresin lay back among the piled pillows with a heavy sigh. It wouldn't be long now. Just a little more time, that was all he needed. Soon he would have what he needed to ensure that the loyalty of his remaining people was paid back. Soon he would have his successor. Break. A 14-year-old Uzumaki Naruto stared out over the devastated landscape that had once been a lush forest with a flourishing village at its center. Now the only thing that remained to even denote that a village had even stood there was the circular wall that had encompassed it, and the carved faces on the overlooking mountain. What could have happened to his home? Where could everyone be? With those thoughts in mind, Naruto began to desperately shift through the rubble, his fear lending him strength he didn't know he had. It lent him strength, speed, and endurance beyond what he knew was possible for him. He had returned to Konoha early from his trip with his teacher, Jiraiya of the Sannin, almost a full year. It wasn't that he was finished with his training, not even close, but Jiraiya had disappeared on him 3 months ago without word, so he figured he could at least go to Konoha and see what had all changed. He had never dared to imagine this. So engrossed in his task was he that he never heard the approach of someone from behind until he sensed an attack. Rolling forward in a ball, he spun around and came face to face with his attacker, a man with bright orange hair and quite a few facial piercings. I thought you would return here, Kyubi Jinchuriki. Are you the one who did this? Naruto growled. Indeed. Why? Because it was needful for peace. Bullshit. Naruto charged recklessly, kunai in hand. This isn't peace. It's death. Exactly, the man replied even as he dodged every enraged strike with an ease that spoke of practice. Humanity can only know true peace once they are all equal. And the only way to make everyone equal is in death. Thus must every living person die. Hell no! There has to be another way. The young man denied, his strikes becoming slower as his anger made him sloppy. Not for this deluded and perverse world, the man stated with conviction. The general treatment of Ujinchuriki is just one example I can use to show you how flawed our world is. Naruto grunted as he was shoved backward by a harsh kick to his stomach. Even so, there should be other choices. What are you going to do? Kill everyone and then yourself? That is exactly what I intend. Naruto blinked. Wha? It is your turn. I've already dealt with everyone else who called Konoha home, and before this I visited both Kumo and Kiri. Don't worry, a tiny sneer could be seen forming on the otherwise impassive face. The other humans won't survive you for very long. Naruto couldn't think. None of this was making any sense. Just because anarchy seemed to be in human nature, they all had to die. That was too extreme. But Konoha was already gone. His friends, the truths of his family that Tsunade-bachan had promised to tell him. And so many more things as well. With his mind crashing into circles, Naruto's legs followed suit, and he fell to his knees in the dirt. He simply couldn't comprehend how this was all happening. He couldn't even focus enough to see his opponent stalking toward him with a kunai ready to slit his throat. Naruto was brought back into the world at the sound of metal clashing, and looked up to see the man's kunai being shoved aside by a white high-heeled left boot. His eyes trailed up the boot to the attached leg, up the leg to a ruffled white hoop skirt that didn't quite manage to hide the newcomer's cyan panties, up the skirt to a lithe upper body, up that to nice set of rounded shoulders, and from there the angle was too bad to see anything more than a head of long black hair. Well, at least it seems I was rescued by a cute girl, I hope. After that thing with Haku. Naruto then took note of another presence to his left, and turned slightly to see another raven-haired girl, this one in black and red, and wielding a pair of claw gauntlets. Aside from the colors of the outfit, and the weapons, he noticed only that her hair was definitely shorter than her white counterpart. Then the new girl spoke, her voice both bored and somehow threatening. He was going to have to ask her how she managed that. I'm sorry, sir, but our master has need of this young man. So we'll be taking him now. I don't think so. The older man replied calmly, though one could see his eyes flickering between the two new arrivals. But we do, the white-clad girl replied, her voice almost identical to her twin. Naruto felt like slapping himself. Twin girls, dressing in opposite colors, with opposite-styled weapons. It wasn't exactly novel, but it was different enough that it threw him for yet another loop, as typically in the shinobi world twins mimicked each other so the enemy didn't know who they were fighting. Don't I get a choice in this? Naruto asked a little timidly, his confusion showing and raising his hand a bit like he was in school. No, said all three of them in unison. Fine then, he sulked, crouching with a paw over his head and one finger drawing circles in the dirt. The white-clad girl finally put her raised leg down. I am Melanie Malachite, this is my sister, Militia. We were sent by Lord Gresson Asmodai, head of the Devil House of Asmodai, to fetch this young man. We will be taking him. The orange-haired man finally showed emotion, incredulous bewilderment. Devil House? Are you high, girl? The only devils in this world are the humans infesting and plaguing it. I honestly don't care what your personal views on your fellow humans are. We have been sent to retrieve this man, and you will not stop us, she replied monotonously. Naruto blinked, the roles were getting corrupted here. First it was him being confused, while the other man was calm and monotone. Now it was the man's turn to be confused, while these girls were dead calm, and apparently monotone. Would it be Naruto's turn for the monotone next? Quite suddenly the man's body jerked into a stiff as a board pose for a moment, before falling to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut, the eyes and the orange-haired body fading from concentric ring purple to a more normal blue. Naruto blinked rapidly at the sight, exchanging curious expressions with the two girls. He then asked the obvious question. What the hell? That would be my doing, a new, definitely female voice said as said woman appeared in a flurry of paper. The idiot never did learn to stop talking while concentrating on his paths. If he had, I'm not sure I'd have ever seen just how far he'd fallen. Naruto's confused expression encompassed the woman in an instant. Long slender legs covered by tight, dark blue pants. Chest covered by a form-fitting black shirt that left her stomach exposed, while swallowtailing out behind her. Aristocratic neck, angular yet beautiful face, dark blue eyeshadow, and blue hair. To finish the odd look off, she had 6 silver piercings, 1 in her lower lip, and 5 in and around her navel, creating a 4-point star effect, and 1 blue paper flower in her hair. He sighed in exasperation. He was getting really tired from all these people showing up out of nowhere. It was really starting to screw with his equilibrium. Okay, and you would be? The new woman raised her head slightly in acknowledgement of the valid question. Conan of Amigacure. I worked with the nut job here before today. I was under the impression that we wanted to bring true peace to these lands. I was not aware he wanted to commit mass genocide to achieve this, however. Fear and destruction, yes, but not complete genocide. So I slit the throat of the true man behind this body. She nudged the corpse at her feet. I then decided to crush his eyeballs and set him on fire, followed by collapsing the floor and roof of the cave he was sitting in. Melanie and Militia blinked, looked at each other, then gave Conan admiring looks. Militia said, while some would think that was somewhat excessive, I believe I speak for my sister and I when say, that was nicely thorough. No kill quite like overkill, Naruto muttered. Precisely, Conan said, hearing him with little difficulty. And just what do you want in exchange for your Melanie hesitated for a moment, searching for the word she wanted, assistance. First, am I correct in assuming you two are not from this world? Conan asked calmly. Yes. We are devils in service to Lord Gresson Asmodai. That's just perfect. Take me with you. The twins blinked at the odd request, looked at each other, then looked at Naruto. They just stood there, continuing to stare at him, as if waiting for him to say yes or no. He quickly grew uncomfortable. Why are you looking at me? Because, due to reasons we are not, Melanie started to say, but Militia interrupted her. Our orders technically make you our boss right now. So we're going to leave this up to you. More blinking, Naruto glanced at Conan, then looked back at the twins with a shrug. Why not? Nothing else today has gone right. Cynicism does not become you. Naruto raised an eloquent eyebrow, hysteria barely held at bay within him. My home is destroyed. I was attacked by a genocidal asshole. Saved by twins in modified maid outfits. Further saved by another woman who could probably give the Shinigami a good run in a staring contest. And now you're saying that for some reason I'm your boss. He paused to let that all sink in before continuing, so fuck you, I'm going to be sullen, cynical, and sarcastic for a while. A silence as deep as the grave settled on the group of four for a few minutes. It was shattered by Conan repeating her request. So are you going to take me with you or not? The twins once again looked at Naruto, who shrugged and said, like I said, why not? I don't even know where they want to take me, but if you want to come along, knock yourself out. You're taking all of this surprisingly well, Conan commented. Really? I just don't think most of it has sunk in yet, Naruto quipped in reply. I'll probably go back to having my breakdown later, once everything's done and I can grieve without interruptions. All three women had the decency to at least look sheepish. In the span of maybe a half hour he'd had several upsets to his life. It was only natural that something had to give in the face of it all. It was just his luck that it was his sense of disaster. Fair enough, all three women muttered in odd concert. So, now that I'm feeling a great deal like I always thought Sasuke might, and I'm not particularly enjoying that I might add, where do you want to take me? Naruto questioned the twins, a fair amount of sarcasm and angst in his voice. Simple, Militia said calmly, ignoring the level of antagonism in the air, we'll be taking you to the underworld where our master lays, dying in his bed. It is he who wishes to see you. And as you have decided, we shall take the woman as well. Naruto nodded, then asked what seemed to be the most pertinent question in his mind. And just how are you going to take me to this underworld? You aren't going to say something like, you need to die, right? Of course not, Melanie retorted swiftly, don't waste our time with these inane questions. We have been watching you for more than 2 months. We know you aren't as simple-minded as you portray. He just shrugged. All right. Sheesh. That doesn't answer the question though. It is fairly simple. We are going to create a one-time use transfer circle that will transport anyone, or anything, within it to the designated opposite location, and then destroy itself. Militia answered before her irritated sister could go on a rant. Transfer circle? Naruto asked, is that anything like Fuinjutsu? Militia shrugged, I don't know. Does this Fuinjutsu work off intricate symbols that are then capable of warping the weft and weave of the world and or universe? The symbols part, yes. The other? If that's what the user wants, then yes again. Then I'd say it's fairly similar. Oh. Cool. Mind if I watch the setup? Be my guest. As Militia went about making a large circle, easily big enough to hold all 4 of them inside it, Naruto was taking mental notes. Despite his horrendous grades in the academy, he'd always had a fondness for the intricacies of Fuinjutsu. It came to him easily, along with sword work, though only Jiraiya had discovered these 2 hidden talents of his. His taijutsu was barely passable as brawling, his ninjutsu ability was only somewhat above average, and his genjutsu abilities were, for the most part, non-existent. Unfortunately for him, though, Jiraiya was only really competent with ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, leaving Naruto to fumble his way through kenjutsu as much as he could with the use of kunai and an odd sword he'd found as a child. "You're not even a little curious or shocked about the existence of devils?" Militia asked as she worked. "Not really," Naruto replied blithely. "Considering that there are people in this world who can breathe fire and lightning, manipulate water molecules out of the very air itself, or command the wind, a devil is hardly something to bat an eyelash at." "Ah," she sweat dropped, "you have a point there." Meanwhile, Melanie took a few deep breaths, and then took up a position of watching for possible trouble. She was joined shortly by Conan, who took up a position directly opposite her. Not that Melanie was going to complain, another pair of eyes, especially ones trained like she assumed Conan was, at least have the amount of work she had to do. Which meant that both women only had to deal with their respective sides, and Melanie could try to come to grips with what she had just learned about Naruto. She and her twin had spent months watching potential candidates to take their lord's position. They had finally settled on this Uzumaki Naruto due to him actually possessing all the attributes that Lord Gressen had listed off. Granted, it wasn't a very long list, being mostly about temperament and morals and ethics, with a few physical characteristics that were needed to pull off a convincing enough show, but still she hadn't expected him to be quite so quick on the uptake. From what she and Militia had seen, he was impulsive, prone to helping others with no thought for reward, unnaturally cheerful, and a natural prankster. Now she had seen him switch into an intelligent, mature young man, with a sense for putting things off until he had the appropriate amount of time for it. This dichotomy was throwing her off enough that she was snapping at him as a way to return him to the knucklehead she had witnessed, and she was honest enough to realize that it wasn't actually going to help her. So now she had figured out a way to fix their already deteriorating she wouldn't call it a relationship just yet, acquaintanceship. Yes, that sounded about right. They didn't really know each other just yet, as was evident by her surprise over his cynical side, so they were acquaintances at best. But if all went according to her master's plans, this young man would become her new lord, and having bad relations with him would be detrimental, to say the least. Arg. Why couldn't he be as simple-minded as he seemed? That would have made it so much easier. Melanie thought, a fool would be placated with a simple apology. Who knows what a man of depth might want in compensation? "He won't mind," a sudden voice in her ear startled her. Melanie spun around, wondering how someone was able to escape her notice, even distracted as she had been. She came face to face with a strange mask, one that resembled a caricature of a cat. The person behind the mask was obviously female, if the body behind a set of gray upper body armor was anything to go by. But before Melanie could speak, the woman had turned away, nearly smacking the white-clad girl with her long purple hair. Naruto noticed the newcomer's presence, and seemed surprised. Nico. The elite forces of any village. They obeyed only their own commander and the Kage of their village, in this case the Hokage. What was she doing here? The woman, now named Nico, knelt in front of him in an obvious sign of submission. "Uzumaki Naruto, on the final command of the Godame Hokage, Senju Tsunade, I was to find you. Having succeeded in that, my objective was to change should the village have fallen in that time, to protect and serve you until my death. From this moment on, you are my Hokage, carrying the entirety of Konoha's will of fire." Naruto stepped forward excitedly. "Nico, what about everyone else? Are there any other survivors?" "If Nico survived, then surely others dash." His thoughts were interrupted by a slow shake of the head. When she spoke again, only the barest of tremors in her voice and posture betrayed her emotional state. "I'm afraid not. I was just about to get off medical leave when the destruction started. Tsunade-sama sent me out with my orders just before the village forces attempted their counterattack." "No one else?" he whispered. A choked sob. "No, there was little enough time to send me." Naruto dropped to one knee in front of her, reached out, grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her into his own, her mask falling in her surprise. "I'm sorry. We both lost everything here. Now all we have left are each other and our memories of our home." The woman broke down and cried into his shoulder, clinging to him for the comfort of knowing someone shared her grief, that she wasn't alone, that there would be a reason to continue existing. Living. She didn't know Uzumaki Naruto well outside of a few missions given to her by the Sandaime Hokage to protect the boy when he was younger, and the civilians were dumber. And of course there were the rumors she'd heard from other shinobi about his skills. He was a good lad, but he hid most of his emotions behind a mask of cheerfulness. She was on duty the day he started to do that, mask his true emotions. It had startled her so much that she had barely managed to remember to report it. Now he was the last link she had to her home of 24 years, and it was her job to serve and protect him. When she had learned he was outside of the village, being taught by Jiraiya of all people, she had despaired of finding him. Jiraiya was infamous for his ability to move around without a seeming pattern, and even if he was dragging an apprentice around with him, the two of them would be nearly impossible to find. So when she had felt a new, strong chakra source enter the remains of the village, she had been filled with both curiosity and dread. Upon finding that the new signal was her target, Nico had nearly danced for joy. He was here. He wasn't dead. He was leaving? Oh, hell and oh. Her desperation had caused her to then appear before him and these strange women. Then what he said hit her, and she pulled back slightly, revealing her heart-shaped face with dead-looking brown eyes. No, Naruto-sama. We have a few other things. Tsunade-sama made certain to send me off with everything she had prepared for you. She meant to give it to you upon your return, but... He nodded, a tear trail running down his cheek from one eye, the other suspiciously dry. But this all happened. I understand. I'll ask you to hold on to whatever it is for a while longer. She nodded, clearing her eyes with one hand. When she looked up again, she took note of the oddity of his eyes. Naruto-sama, why does only one eye weep? He raised a hand to his right eye, the one not leaking tears. Oh, this? It's fake, Nico. One of the enemies I faced last year got a little too creative, and heavily poisoned a rusty knife. I'm rather lucky, apparently, as it missed piercing into my brain by mere millimeters, and it didn't touch outside the eyeball so it didn't scar. Unfortunately, as Jiraiya and I were supposed to be not drawing attention to ourselves, I had to get a fake to replace the destroyed eye. Medics capable of transplants or regrowth are rare, you know? He scratched his cheek below the fake eye a little. If nothing else, it has reinforced the need to pay attention in battles, and to think before I do something. This one injury taught me almost as much as Jiraiya did. Nico stared in shock. Melanie stared in shock. Militia stared in shock. Conan gaped openly. How could he be so nonchalant about something like that? He just smirked at them, and they could feel the smugness in his voice. Come on, ladies, if you're this shocked, think how my opponents of the past year would react knowing they got their asses handed to them by a half-blind man? On the upside, it moves and seems to focus like a normal eye, so it's more than capable of fooling my enemies. They just stared some more, before Militia shook her head in admiration and went back to work on the transfer circle, making certain it would accommodate yet one more person. If there was one thing she was sure of after observing him, it was that Naruto would never leave a comrade behind. So she may as well see to it that this new woman could come along as well. Naruto picked up the fallen mask, looked at it for a moment, then to Nico's revealed face. So, when the mask is off, who are you? She snatched the mask out of his hands, a small blush of embarrassment on her cheeks. Yuzuki Yugao, she mumbled. Yugo-chan, huh? She blushed a bit more at the suffix. All right. I've decided. She looked at him curiously. Unless you absolutely have to, I don't want you wearing that mask. I get the feeling I'm going to need a friend in the days to come, and you and I have at least some history beyond today. I'll need Yuzuki Yugo probably as much as I'll need Umbaniko. Yugao thought about it for a little bit, and reluctantly had to agree with him. Very well, she replied as she attached the mask to her waist, next to her weapons pouch and a large scroll. Naruto's gaze traveled downward. I take it that scroll holds the things you were talking about. What Tsunade wanted me to have? Yes. Ah. He sounded satisfied. Yeah, hold on to that a while longer. As you wish, she took up a position at his side, keeping an eye out for trouble, causing Melanie and Conan to return to doing the same. Naruto, on the other hand, went back to observing Militia's work, noting the slight changes that were necessary to allow more people. If nothing else, this was a good learning opportunity. Shudder! Never thought the day would come when I would want to study something. I'm done, Militia announced, stepping into the circle. We can go now, Naruto-sama. Stepping into the circle, Naruto took one last look at the demolished area that had been his hometown. He burned the image into his memory. He would never let another home of his suffer this fate. Break. His vision cleared, and Naruto's first thought was, that's excessive. To be fair, his sight rested on an enormous mansion of a design he was unfamiliar with, but he was certain it was more than a tad over the top. Soaring turrets, graceful arches, wrought iron fences, stained glass high windows, a small gathering of maids and butlers. Wait, what? Welcome, Naruto-sama, came a chorus of voices as 7 people bowed to him. A single older-looking man dressed in a sharp suit stepped forward and went to one knee on the cobblestones at Naruto's feet. On behalf of everyone, I welcome you, Naruto-sama. I am Sebastian, head butler to the Asmodai house. Do you or your companions require anything before you meet with Lord Gresson? Naruto blinked, and then looked at both Yugao and Konan. The two women just shook their heads. No, it seems we're good right now. Seabass stood gracefully and with great dignity. Very good, Naruto-sama. Then if you three would follow me, I will conduct you to my master immediately. Of course, a Seabass-san, was it? Just Seabass is fine, Naruto-sama. As they walked through the mansion, Naruto and the two kunoichi took in the details of the design. Now, Naruto would be the first to admit that he didn't exactly have a great sense of style, but the number of potential assassination points they passed was simply staggering. It was like the designer couldn't conceive of anyone trying to harm the masters of this place and built it without any kind of practicality outside of the columns needed to bear the weight. Honestly, this place was starting to put him on edge. Is everything alright, Naruto-sama? Seabass asked, head turned just enough to see the unease in his charges. I'm well enough, Seabass, Naruto answered, but as someone trained as a shinobi, an assassin basically, this place is practically a murder funhouse. It's a little offsetting. Ah, the older man responded with an understanding tone. I see. Yes, this mansion was designed in the days before assassination was common, and none of the lords since then have attempted to rectify this. It is of little concern either way. He turned his attention back to the direction they were traveling. Few have dared to come after any of the lords in recorded history, and those who have did not live long enough to come near them. Naruto felt a little impressed at that statement, but could not help asking, out of curiosity, why is that? Seabass replied evenly, because we servants protected them. Even if we had not, there are a few others who stand as guardians. I have little doubt you will meet them soon enough. The young man blinked. He was doing that a lot today. He looked at Yugao. I have the feeling I was just politely told to shut up. Is that right, or am I imagining things? The woman just smiled at him slyly. Yes. Naruto shook his head. You are enjoying this far too much, you know that? Her smile didn't change in the least, probably. But unlike you, I actually had to watch Konoha's destruction, so forgive me my coping mechanism. Naruto had the grace to look both sheepish and chagrined at that. Right, sorry Yugao. Considering I'm doing almost the exact same thing, I don't really have the right to talk, huh? No, you really don't. Further conversation was interrupted by coming to a set of double doors, where Seabass knocked once. Lord Gresson, the twins have returned with the subject. Very good, let them in, Seabass, a thin voice responded from the other side of the door. Naruto shared a quick glance with his two human companions, each of them having the same thought. That voice may have been thin, but there was an undeniable amount of authority in it. That was the sound of someone who regularly gave orders, expecting them to be carried out faithfully, and was not disappointed in their faith. No, that was the voice of a man who knew his servants intimately, and they him, and both sides had bonded so strongly that the very thought of disobedience or betrayal was anathema. Seabass opened the door and allowed the three ninja to enter, closing the door behind them. The first thing Naruto noticed upon scanning the room was the rich upholstery, from several velvet couches and hanging tapestries to a giant curtained four-poster bed. The second thing he took note of was a beautiful woman in a demure yet seductive white dress with two horns that looked somewhat like a crown and twin pairs of black feathered wings on her lower back. Okay, she's beyond good looking. It's too bad that I'm certain if I look too long she'd try to castrate me. A heavy cough brought his attention to the sole occupant of the bed. Naruto took the man in at a glance. Emaciated figure, withered white hair, pale gray complexion, sunken cheeks, and a small amount of blood now spattering the bed sheets that covered him. The man's eyes, however, caught Naruto's attention. A bright, lively and vivid eyes spoke of an unwavering conviction and determination. They told Naruto that this man was alive right now only because of his pure willpower to push back death's hand. Naruto swept into a low bow of respect. Lord Gresson Asmodai, I assume? Yugao stared at the young man in shock. She had never heard him be polite to anyone, not even to the Sandaime Hokage who practically adopted him. Heck, according to what she had heard, Naruto wouldn't even show respect to the daimyo. Yet here he was, bowing and speaking with a respect and deference that she had not seen or heard of outside of imperial courts. This is Uzumaki Naruto. A young man with manners. I am surprised. Especially considering that the files I have on your personality say that you wouldn't even use those manners with your own leaders. A hollow echoing cough came from the old man as he unconsciously echoed Yugao's thoughts, but not answering the question. Naruto straightened his back and an impish grin crossed his face. Oh, I have manners. I just reserve them for moments when they are either more deserved or important. Another dry laugh came from the supposed Lord Gresson. Well, at least you seem to have a keen grasp of your situation. Something many young devils your age lack these days. Wouldn't know, I don't think I've met any young devils. Naruto replied cheekily. You have, the woman in white said, her voice a lilting melody that was quite pleasant to hear. The twins sent to retrieve you are not truly much older than yourself. Come now, Albedo, the old man chided, you know the government's stance on reincarnated devils. Yes, she agreed, not bothering to reveal what they were talking about, but I also know that none in this house are of the same opinion, Gressen-sama. Well, that answered Naruto's question from earlier. This was indeed the Lord Gressen Asmodai he heard the twins talking about earlier. That was nice of her. Well, shall we get down to business? Lord Gressen asked with a certain amount of amusement. Since Albedo has accidentally ruined the fun I was having of keeping you children guessing as to whom I am, I'll just say it, Uzumaki Naruto. I want to formally adopt you as my son, and have you inherit everything I own. Naruto stared at the elderly man in absolute shock. This was so far away from what he thought was going to happen. I'm sorry. What? The old man cracked a grin. I want to adopt you as my son, using an ancient ritual, so that my house is not destroyed and erased upon my death. This means that everything I own will become yours, my servants included, as they have chosen to remain in service to my house. Naruto blinked again. A third time. Then he shook himself, like a dog shaking water from its fur. Too many things. He had far too much on his plate right now. I don't suppose I could have time to think about it. I kinda have a lot on my plate at the moment. A few weeks, maybe a month at most. I am quite nearly at my limit as it is, Lord Gressen admitted with a small nod. As it stands, I will have to leave the bulk of your education as a devil up to my servants, like Albedo. Naruto nodded, sketched a half bow and turned to leave the room, still a little stunned, but half turned back. One question, why me? Lord Gressen coughed again, blood once again mixing into his otherwise pristine sheets. He gave the young human a wry expression. My wife was blonde. Bright as a wheat field kissed by the noonday sun. Not unlike your own. My father was possessed of blue eyes, once again not unlike your own. Those physical qualities were necessary to pull off an adoption that doesn't look like an adoption. There can be no true doubt as to your legitimacy to the Asmodai name. He sighed heavily, sinking slightly into the pillows propping him up. He gestured to Albedo, urging her to continue the explanation in his place. Of course, if that was all that was required, we could have simply found a devil to easily carry the name. However, Gressen-sama was adamant that the person he adopted should have many of the same morals and ethics he himself possessed. Of all the potential candidates, you, Uzumaki Naruto-sama, have everything he listed. Honor, courage, noble character, kindness, gentle when needed, and capable of a strong stance when you wish to not be moved. She paused for a moment. In other words, he wanted a strong person, not merely a powerful one. Naruto nodded. That he understood. A person was only truly strong when they had the heart and will to protect someone or something precious. He truly believed that, and apparently Gressen Asmodai was of a similar opinion. Very well, the young blonde said. I'd like to get rid of some of the things on my plate first, but I can guarantee an answer in no more than 2 weeks. Break. Naruto, why did you say you could guarantee him an answer so quickly? He sighed at Yugao's question. Seabass had seen the three of them to another richly appointed room so they could rest. For some reason Konan refused to leave him, and Yugao felt that her oath to be both his friend and protector meant that she should be near him at all times. Because first I need to grieve for Konoha's loss. I estimate that alone will take a few days, maybe a full week. A blush colored both women's cheeks as they realized that they had actually managed to forget about the village. Yugao mentally kicked herself. It was her home, yet she had forgotten about it in the last hour or so. What kind of person did that make her? Konan cleared her throat to clear the awkward air. You said that was first, what's second then? He grinned hollowly, not an ounce of amusement reaching his eyes. I think that I should talk in depth with both of you about this. Both of you followed me away from our world, so I think it only fair that you have a say in where we go from here. Konan shrugged. I can give you my answer right now, she said as a single black feathered wing sprouted from her right shoulder. I'm at least half of this world, so I don't mind if you take him up on his offer. I'll just keep following you until you do something I don't agree with. Sound good? Naruto nodded dumbly. She had a wing? What the heck? Yugao had a thoughtful expression. I think there will be things we need to talk about, but first should come the release of grief. Agreed. With that said, he wrapped an arm around each of their necks and began sobbing into their shoulders, letting go of the tears and pain he was barely holding back. It didn't take long for Yugao to join him in tears, burrowing her face into the side of his neck. Meanwhile, Conan just sat there, holding them both. She had no attachment to Konoha, but a single tear did course its way down her cheek for all the needless lives lost. None of them noticed when someone entered and left a tray of food and drink behind. Naruto woke to bright sunlight directly on his face and groaned. He had an absolutely massive headache, and as he tried to cover his eyes he realized that he couldn't move either arm. Opening one bleary eye and looking to either side, his mind bolted awake in panic. He could feel it now, the soft suppleness of the two naked women using his arms for pillows. He could feel also the stickiness that was unique to dried perspiration and saliva and another liquid he couldn't quite identify. He could smell it, a heavy muskiness in the air. And as he shifted a little to try and get full feeling back in his arms, he could also see it, the sheen that a body got only after an intense level of exertion. Naruto also saw the beautiful swells of both Yugao's and Conan's naked curves. The supple skin, the toned muscles, the soft hair, and who would have guessed that both their unnatural hair colors were natural? He saw the long, shapely legs, intertwined with his own. He felt their breaths on his neck, Yugao to the right and Conan to the left. Well, he assumed it was Yugao on his right. Considering his right eye was fake, it was a little hard to discern much on the side of him in the way of colors, or anything for that matter. But if that purple tuft of neatly trimmed purple hair between those legs that he could just barely make out with his left eye was anything to go by, it should definitely be Yugao on his right. Maybe he should see what could be done about that right eye of his. He really wished he could see out of it right now, if only to better take in the sight of her naked form. Then he smelled it. From their breath came the slightest scent of something sweet and arousing. He blinked. They drugged us? Now Naruto was rather resistant to any form of drug, so to get past that was a feat in and of itself. That being said, he knew he was not immune. Which meant that either they gave him a lot of it, or they managed to increase the potency. He cast his mind back, looking for his last clear memory. There were flashes of immense pleasure, and scenes that Jiraiya probably would have sold his soul for. Scenes that included both of the women on either side of him doing such lewd and perverse acts that Naruto could feel himself becoming aroused all over again, and only through sheer force of will was he able to calm down and see the images flashing through his mind with a detached clinical perspective. It seemed that several days had passed, if the vague sense of time lost was any indication. He could even vaguely recall being fed some kind of seafood dish that inflamed his libido to levels that he hadn't known were possible. And there was a drink too. Came a moan from his right. Looking over, he was just in time to see Yugao's eyes flutter open, then snap awake in shock and realization. Then he was witness to the expressions that flitted across her face as she probably took the exact same route to identifying what likely occurred as he had. They had been trained in the same academy after all, even if the institution had fallen somewhat from her time in it. Finally she sighed, and her eyes cleared and looked at him. So drugs? Most likely. We're going to kill them for it, right? Probably. Probably? He shrugged as best he could with her still using his arm to rest her head, his features somewhat resigned. Yeah. I'll at least hold off until I hear their story. Then I thought that you might like to do the job yourself. I'll admit I do feel the need to cut something. As long as it isn't me, I'm fine with that. She hummed. What do you think they fed us? Naruto asked, unintentionally staying quiet so as to not disturb Conan and possibly have another woman to deal with right now. Yugao shrugged one shoulder. I recall some kind of seafood dish, probably a kind of clam or oyster, which are natural aphrodisiacs, and in our emotional turmoil it wouldn't have taken much for us to make that leap. The drink, though, she trailed off, thinking. It almost seemed like the stories I've heard of something called shava, a drink derived from coffee that is said to inflame passions. It does, came a sleepy voice from the other side. It seemed that Conan decided to wake up and join the conversation. I've had it once before, as a young child. Of course, as a child it does little more than coffee would, she said, sleep still heavy in her voice. You're taking this well, Yugao said, eyeing the other woman suspiciously. Yes, I suppose I am, Conan admitted, but then I was going to suggest something like this. Not the drugs, but the sex and potential pregnancies. Naruto lost his composure. What do you mean? The blue-haired woman sat up, not bothering to try and hide her naked form. He'd already seen it after all. As the last of the Uzumaki bloodline, it would be your duty to see it continue. If the ritual Lord Gresson plans to use is the same kind as I'm thinking, then it will most likely replace all of your human blood with his own, which would end the Uzumaki line. She gave the young man a gimlet stare. Yugao and I are both human, or half in my case. We are the best, and only real choices, to make certain that the Uzumaki bloodline not only continues, but is not contaminated by other bloodline traits. As far as I know, my own abilities are singular, and not the result of my family's blood. And Yugao is completely human, so I doubt anything weird will pop up in her children. Be that as it may, Yugao interrupted, sitting up as well. I still would have preferred to have a choice in the matter. Would you have turned it down? Conan arched an eyebrow with her question. Yugao snorted, no. I've always wanted to be a mother, and with hate gone this was likely to be my last chance as a human. Besides, her features softened, I'm still under oath to serve Naruto. If I can best do that by making sure his bloodline continues, I honestly don't mind, as the result is something I want as well. Don't mind me, Naruto said from his position still laying on the bed. It's not as if my opinion matters in this. I'm glad you understand, the two women said in unison. He sighed. This was going to be a long morning. It really was a long morning. When a man in a red suit and with a long metallic-looking tail named Demiurge showed up to see if everything was alright, the three ninja asked him what was in the food and drink they had been given. Turned out that it was all considered only a minor enhancement for devils and demons, and the staff hadn't known that it would affect humans or half-breeds as strongly as it did. Which meant that Naruto and the others couldn't even be angry with them, as it was a simple mistake. Albeit one that was continued for a couple days before being found out as the culprit, but a mistake nonetheless. Naruto sighed heavily. He was sitting on a large couch that was obviously placed in the room for some extra comfort. He placed a cup of perfectly ordinary tea, he made certain that it had been collected from somewhere other than the underworld, down on a facing coffee table. So, 2 days, huh? We were at it for 2 days. He raised his eyes to the two women sitting on either side of him, noting silently that neither had really bothered with putting on more than a small White House robe. Not that he could say anything about that, as he hadn't bothered with anything more either. I don't suppose it's too early to determine if you're pregnant? Yugao chuckled. I'd think so. Demiurge, who had been standing quietly by the door after explaining the problems, interjected, actually there's a small spell that could be used to tell if your eggs have been properly fertilized. Albedo is almost certain to know it. Naruto blinked, and looked suspiciously at Demiurge's placid face. He sighed again. She practiced it in the hopes of using it on herself, didn't she? The older man looked surprised. How did you know? There are few reasons a woman that devoted to her lord would know such a spell, Naruto said quietly, his eyes never leaving Demiurge's face so he could watch the expressions flicker across it. It appeared that Demiurge had a horrible poker face. And those would be? Number 1. She is the recognized nurse or doctor of the house, Naruto replied seriously, holding up one finger to emphasize which point he was on. Now, given her interactions with Lord Gresson, this is not impossible, as I'm fairly certain that she has not left his bedside for anything but necessary breaks. Showers and clean clothes and whatnot. However, I've seen many a nurse and doctor, mostly for reasons beyond my control and not of my own choice. She does not give off the feel of one. Demiurge nodded with a faint smile. You are correct. She is not our doctor or nurse. Please continue. Drawing in a deep breath, Naruto raised a second finger. Number 2, she is secretly, or not so secretly, in love with someone and hopes to conceive. Thus she would learn the spell in question in order to be certain as quickly as possible that it is done. Again, given her interactions with Lord Gresson, and doubting her leaving of his side for anything but those necessary breaks, I would assume she is in love with him, and hope that he would give her a child. Wait, Yugao interrupted. Albedo is in love with Lord Gresson? Are you sure? Naruto nodded. Demiurge's face gives me all the confirmation I need. He has a horrible poker face. Said Demon smiled widely. Or I know how to use my expressions to mislead people into believing what I wish them to, he said slyly, then raised a hand to forestall any comments. However, in this case you are correct. Albedo did indeed learn the spell in hopes that with the passing of Lady Kethri, Gresson-sama's wife, that he would deign to turn his love to her and grant her a child of her own. But it was not to be, Demiurge continued. Gresson-sama was far too in love with Lady Kethri to fall in love that way again. Certainly he loves Albedo, but as a father would dote on a daughter. It is not as she wished. I see, Naruto murmured. He stared at his cup of tea for a moment longer, then looked at Konan and Yugao, getting nods from them. Then please call for her. As much as I don't like how it came about, the continuation of my human line was one of the biggest things on my mind. Konan stared. Then why were you so against it earlier? I wasn't against having children as a human, Naruto shrugged, but I had wanted to discuss it with you two first on how to go about it. I wasn't necessarily going to propose to use your wombs for it though. Yugao smacked him upside the head and scolded him. You little fool, if you hadn't brought it up, I'm sure Conan would have. And I know that if I'd been given the choice, I'd have done it anyway, just as I said a while ago. She glared at him for a moment longer, then dropped her gaze, though I'll admit I would have liked to have that choice. It is inconsequential now. What has been done is done. Naruto rubbed his head where she hit him. Damn it, she hit hard. Although, he mused, she still doesn't hit as hard as Sakura. Ano Demiurge sounded a little confused. Are you three really doing all right? I'd heard that humans tended to need a long time to get over their grief. All three of them gave him ruefully amused gazes, their previous discussion put aside for the time being, and Naruto answered him. All ninja are trained from a young age, Demiurge. This training includes being able to push past grief, and to get it all out in one go so it doesn't consume us. It's a second-year subject, but it goes all year, and culminates in the raising of a pet and then killing it. I got kinda lucky in that, Naruto mused. I got a rather ornery chicken that tasted great as a soup ingredient. Yugao looked at him strangely. A chicken? My class received hamsters. Conan answered softly. I didn't go through an academy, but I did have to kill a pet dog I had as a child so I didn't starve. I suppose the situation for me was just harsh enough that I learned the lesson instinctively. Naruto shrugged. Either way, ours was a kill or be killed world. You grew up fast or you didn't live to grow old. The two women nodded. They could easily agree with that. Demiurge, however, looked interested. A world where humans were trained in such a way could be a good place to harvest more servants or other materials necessary to help bring House Asmodai back into glory. He was his master's bishop. His every thought was on how to bring further glory to his master's name. Even now, as that master lay dying in bed, if Demiurge could bring more glory to his name, then the demon-turned-devil would do just that. Now, Naruto continued, bringing the man's attention back to the present. If you don't mind, Demiurge, would you mind getting Albedo for that spell while these two and I discuss a few things? Important secret things, I suppose? Demiurge asked with an amused smile. Not really secret, but not really for outsiders either, came a somewhat expected response. Very well, but please do not leave the room. We cannot risk any potential spies seeing you before the ceremony is complete. With that, the man gave a small bow and left the room. Once the doors closed, Naruto stood up and moved to look out a large bay window. Assuming the leave behind Uzumaki children thing is taken care of, I suppose the next thing to wonder is if this ritual will fulfill the requirement of death that could possibly free the Kyuubi from the seal. Conan and Yugao exchanged surprised glances. They hadn't thought of that. It's possible, I suppose, Conan said lowly. I'll admit I don't really know much about the rituals of this world, mostly due to my parents dying when I was so young, so I had to try and piece together things from what they left behind, but I have to imagine that it won't so much kill you as remake a portion of you. It would be a good idea to find out for certain though, Yugao cautioned. The best person to ask would be Lord Gresson himself, Naruto mused aloud, one hand coming up to lay on the window frame. That is certainly true, Conan muttered, leaning back into the plush couch. Would not one of the servants possibly know? Yugao questioned. I suppose, Naruto allowed, his gaze roaming over what he could see of the outside. It looked like they were placed in a room facing an inner courtyard which was dominated by a rather breathtaking fountain and surrounding hedge maze garden. He would be the first to admit that he didn't know much about flowers, but even he could see plants in bloom that either did not or could not exist in his world. That black and gray rose, for example. He shook his head, no time to be wool-gathering. His right hand came up to trace the scar over his right eye. Maybe I should see what can be done about this, he muttered softly. Ever since he had lost that right eye, he had been slightly jumpy whenever someone or something came at him from that side. He assumed that his old teacher, Kakashi, had a similar problem with his covered Sharingan. Hypersensitivity could prove to be a problem eventually. His mind could only stay on alert like this for so long before it overloaded and caused an issue. He wasn't quite as quiet as he had thought apparently, as Yugao voiced an opinion. You mean your eye? Yes, that could prove problematic later. I agree, Conan said quietly. While it's impressive that you've managed for this long, the added level of paranoia can't be mentally healthy. Naruto shrugged, a wry grin on his lips. We lived in a world where just being associated with a particular village meant you could be killed at any time. Paranoia was every ninja's best friend. Though you aren't wrong, he conceded, the human brain can only handle so much. I'm fairly lucky in that regard, as the Kyuubi seemingly doesn't want a brain-dead container, so it's been keeping my brain from overloading so far, but only time will tell how long that lasts. Yugao looked a little uncomfortable. You mean you talk to it? Naruto turned his wry grin to her, not so much talk, as I get vague impressions. Anytime my ability to become a brain-dead sack of useless flesh comes up, I get the distinct feeling of annoyance. Oh. Well, that seemed to make her more at ease. Though we have had a few conversations, Naruto admitted blithely, waving one hand dismissively in the air. Most of them boiled down to QB trying to either piss me off enough to remove the seal, or it using the hypocrisies of our world to shame me into releasing it. Conan frowned a bit. That sounds remarkably human-like. As if it really understands us. Oh, it understands us, Naruto stated firmly, never think otherwise. I managed to wriggle out of it that it has been sealed in at least 2 other Jinchuriki before me, and through interacting with them it learned a very great deal. Enough that I almost fell to one of those shaming tactics. What? Yugao exclaimed. Yeah, something about missing the feel of the wind and sun on its fur, and just being able to lay in the shade of an enormous tree for hours for a nap, he said, taking a seat on a couch facing the 2 women. I think that may have been one of the few times QB was being honest with me. Both women looked as if someone had hit them with a club. The idea that the QB, the most dangerous and powerful creature that either knew existed, could act like a regular animal, and just enjoy the wind and sun, it was too surreal for them. Naruto gave them an amused smile. You both seem to have forgotten the legend. The bijou were supposedly made from the power of an ancient beast of destruction, and the Rakuto Senin's imagination. Having been created by a man, however powerful he might have been, was bound to rub off on all of them to some degree. Naruto-sama is correct, a soft voice interrupted, and they took note that they were no longer alone in the room as Albedo continued. Any creation will unconsciously take on aspects of its creator. It is the same for creations of energy as much as of flesh, for the creator must impart some of themselves each time. This is a basic tenet of creation in all worlds. Albedo-san, Naruto said easily, taking her presence in stride, what timing you have. I take it Lord Gresson is stable for a while? Or at least in no danger of passing while you are gone? Yes, Naruto-sama, the beautiful dark-haired woman replied, I believe you asked for me? Yes, I was told you know a spell or technique to determine pregnancy as early as conception? He questioned gently. Indeed, I have such a spell, she confirmed. I assume you wish me to use it upon these 2 women? If you would be so kind, he demurred, then we have a few questions about the ritual that Lord Gresson wishes to use. I don't suppose you would know someone we could ask? I wouldn't wish to tax Lord Gresson's remaining strength unduly. I myself should have the answers you seek, she said as she moved over to Conan and Yugao, her right hand lighting up with a soft gray glow. She paused with her hand a little ways from Conan's belly as the blue-haired woman tensed slightly. Do not worry, even we devils would not harm an unborn babe. Reassured, Conan relaxed and let Albedo place the glowing limb upon her. A moment later Albedo moved over to Yugao, repeating the glowing spell as it seemed to have a one-charge use. Albedo nodded and stepped back to face the 3 humans. Well, the news is good, Naruto-sama. They are certainly pregnant, and while it is currently too early to tell, even with magic, just how many children will be born, it seems as though they will both bear you twins, the white-garbed woman said with a small smile. Albedo would admit that she didn't much care for humans, but she was a woman who had longed for a child of her own. As such, knowing new life would be coming soon was something she delighted in. She'd just have to make sure Demiurge knew that both the women and the eventual children were off limits to his experiments, or he may end up doing something without the Lord's permission. Whether that Lord would be Gresson-sama or Naruto-sama, it didn't matter in Albedo's mind. The Lord was the Lord, and she served the Lord of House of Asmodai. If that meant keeping 2 women and their children safe from Demiurge's experiments, then so be it. Albedo-san? Hearing her name snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned her attention fully upon the blond young man. He was handsome enough, she supposed, in a fair way. Bright cerulean blue eyes, sun-kissed golden and untamed hair, tan skin from time spent working in the sun, and those 3 whisker-like markings on each of his cheeks. A strong jawline, and high cheekbones, as though chiseled from stone, and a powerful body with a distinct V-shape in the abdomen that many a man would probably kill for. This was a body meant to be used, not merely displayed. The body of a warrior, came the unbidden thought. But he wasn't her beloved Gresson. She may end up serving this young man, but she doubted if she would ever move on from her current silent love for her master. Gresson saved her from a life on the streets in despair after her first lord was killed in another realm. For that alone she would always love him. Yes, Naruto-sama? She queried. I was asking about the ritual, Naruto replied, easily brushing off her previous inattention. Specifically what it all entails and what happens. She paused to collect her thoughts. It's relatively simple in theory. Gresson-sama will bond your blood with a sample of his own and that of Kethri-sama, which was kept in case of an emergency. In essence, it will rewrite your genetic structure from your current parents to that of Lord Gresson and Lady Kethri, instantly reincarnating you as their child. Will it count as dying? He asked, keeping a sharp eye on her expression. She shook her head lightly. No. Your soul will not leave you for any length of time, it will simply be remaking you, adding or subtracting as needed to your DNA. As far as I know, the only thing of yourself that will be unaffected will be your soul. Could it repair things that are currently missing? Yugao questioned, thinking of his right eye. Albedo paused to think, and then shrugged minimally. I shouldn't think so. Why? Yugao gestured at Naruto. His right eye is false, so I wondered if that would be fixed. Albedo gained an understanding look. Unfortunately, I don't think it will. It is much the same as the spell used by Ajuka Beelzebub in his evil pieces to resurrect other species as devils. She held up a hand to forestall their questions, which is something that I will explain at a later time, should Naruto-sama accept and become Gresson-sama's son. Suffice it to say that when those items are used, the people they are used on do not regain lost limbs. As such, I doubt it would repair a lost eye. Naruto had an understanding look on his face. I see, this literally remakes me from Uzumaki Naruto into Naruto Asmodai. And these evil pieces you mention are something you don't really want information on getting around, right? Albedo nodded softly with an apologetic smile. Yes. He waved off her unsaid apology. There's no need to be sorry, Albedo-san. These are things I need to know, so when the unexpected comes up I'll be ready for it. She smiled in amusement. You say that like it's a foregone conclusion that something strange will happen. He shrugged and grinned. You could say that. Trouble seems to follow me like a lost puppy, and delights in causing me frustration like a scorned lover. Albedo blinked, then looked to the other two women. They nodded. Yugao had watched him as a child, and witnessed the trouble he got into on a regular basis. Whereas Conan had read the many reports the Akatsuki spies had found on him, and had honestly found it endearingly funny how much trouble seemed to love the boy. She mentally shrugged. It wasn't her problem. She decided to voice a question of her own. Naruto-sama? You mentioned you had a great many things on your plate that you needed to take care of. How are those coming along, if I may ask? Naruto blinked, then grinned again. Well, you've answered two of my problems already. One was that I, as the last known Uzumaki, had a duty to leave behind children to continue my line. As you've stated, this ritual will mean I am no longer an Uzumaki save in spirit, which means that I would have had to get at least one woman pregnant. He nodded to the two ladies across from him. Thanks to your serving staff unwittingly drugging us, that has been settled. The next on my list was that this ritual not kill me, as I have another being bound to me by a powerful sealing technique, and I really don't want to simply let it out like that. That could prove to be more than a bit of trouble. Her rueful expression said that she felt this might be something of an understatement, and he just laughed at it. The next item on my list was my missing right eye, which I will be looking into replacing with a working eye after the ritual. Albedo blinked. Why wait until after? It's quite simple, he said. It has to do with the following item on my list. I have to look at a scroll my Hokage and grandmother figure left for me. It may or may not contain an answer to that problem, and if it does, I don't necessarily want to lose a gift like that because I was being hasty. Ah, she murmured. What else could she say? It was another inheritance of his, and he had every right to see it first. There was no doubt some incredibly sentimental things in there that he could probably only access as a human. I was wondering if you'd remember that, Yugao grumbled. She'd lugged it out of Konoha's destruction with her, he'd better look in it. She wanted to know what was in there too, damn it. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Sorry, Yugao. I was originally intending to get to it right after the grief session, but then all of this other stuff came up. Okay, yeah, that's a valid excuse, Yugao thought to herself with a small sweat drop. Albedo cleared her throat softly, just enough to get their attention. If that is all, Naruto-sama, I shall return to Gresson-sama's side. Of course, Albedo-san, he smiled and waved aside her concerns. I shall have the Malachite sisters on standby outside the room should you need anything, Naruto-sama. With a small bow, Albedo left the room. Naruto sighed and leaned back into the couch. If not for her willingness to help, he'd have thought Albedo didn't like him. He could understand it a fair bit. She was in love with her currently dying master, and Naruto was being given time to get his shit together before becoming the old devil's new son. That was bound to throw just about anyone for a loop, so rather than dislike him, she was simply keeping her manner calm and respectful. It wasn't so different from how humans would act, so he was hardly going to hold it against her. Besides, she was very nice eye candy. Even if he would likely never touch her in that way, he was hardly stopped from appreciating the view. Much like a bonfire, he could admire, but he wasn't going to touch. He also wasn't about to go and peek on her in the bath. Unlike his teacher Jiraiya, Naruto had limits to how far he'd go to appreciate the female form. If they showed it willingly, such as a personal choice of dress, then he would look, admire, and move on unless they showed an interest in something more. A thump pulled him from his contemplations, and he looked down to see Yugao had plunked the large scroll on the small table that sat between the two couches. He looked up a bit and saw her glare, daring him to avoid it any longer. With another sigh, this time one of resignation, he reached out and opened the scroll. Lines of neat and orderly Fuinjutsu script met their eyes, and Naruto snorted. Fuinjutsu was always something of a passion of his, though most wouldn't have believed it. He easily recognized the locks that could only be undone by either a specific person, himself, or a certain family line, Uzumaki. Shaking his head, he muttered about blood seals, and bit his thumb. Running the bloody digit with a small amount of chakra, people always forgot that part of the sealing, and he never did understand why. Even if it was tagged to a bloodline, it still required an active amount of chakra to unlock them, and in response 2 folders, a jar of some kind of murky liquid, and several scrolls, some rather large, appeared. Naruto blinked. Any idea where to start? Shrugging, Yugo picked up one of the folders. This was going to take some time, so she figured she might as well start with the first thing she saw. Are you certain about this, Gressen-sama? Albedo asked her bedridden master anxiously. There is still time, we don't need this human. We could. Gressen raised one of his emaciated hands to stop her impassioned speech. No, Albedo, we do not have time. He coughed heavily, bloody spittle flying from his lips. I'm afraid I was very much speaking the truth to young Naruto. I have at most a few weeks left, and that is only because I refuse to die just yet. But Gressen-sama, this time it was Demiurge who spoke up from his position at the foot of the bed. This young man seems to be utterly normal. Aside from an odd feeling of a passive sacred gear, I feel nothing from him. Gressen chuckled weakly, and turned his attention to the third member in the room. And you, Cocytus? From what little you have seen of this young man, have you taken his measure? Cocytus was a hulking specter of blue armor with 4 distinct arms, and an obvious insect-like appearance. Yet despite this odd form, the being's very posture screamed that they were a warrior with few peers. The ever-present halberd clasped in one of their right hands didn't hurt that image either. Though the 3 eyes on either side of his head and randomly clicking mandibles were somewhat unnerving to view at first. A blast of cold air escaped the giant figure, approximating a sigh perhaps? His voice, for the creature was obviously male even with his appearance, was rough and had a heavy amount of vibration in it. I cannot say for certain, but he has the trust of his 2 companions, and he has the bearing of one who has seen battle. With his world's primary profession being assassination, I would surmise that he has had to learn how to hide his very presence, lest he give himself away. It would hardly do for him to fail simply because his targets felt him coming. Came a disbelieving female voice from the shadows to the left of the large bed. A young woman with pale skin and bright red eyes appeared wearing a type of Gothic Lolita-style dress. Her otherwise pretty face was screwed up in a disdainful sneer. What are you talking about, you big cockroach? The girl said sharply. Are those 6 eyes of yours only for decoration? There's nothing of the warrior about the kid. Hiding himself? I say that he simply has nothing to show. Gressen chuckled softly. So you don't see it either, my dear pawn, Shalter? You are in agreement with Albedo and Demiurge? Shalter's head rose in a semi-defiant manner and nodded resolutely. She would never defy or dispute her master, who had taken in a young Shinso, one, like her, and then cared for her like she was his own daughter. She loved and respected Gressen too much to ever shame him in such a way, but on the matter of this young human boy. Gressen chuckled again. And you, my fierce and loyal knight Cocytus? Would you not say the boy is a fit successor? Cocytus came to attention as he was addressed by his lord. I do not agree with the others, my lord. I see great potential within him. I suspect, however, that he has been hindered greatly in his early development, as his walk is at once the confident stride of a young man, and the slightly hesitant step of an abused child. He is a contradiction, my lord, and I would not pass my judgment until I know more. Abuse? Demiurge wondered out loud, his voice cutting before Cocytus could wax eloquently as he was wont to do. Why would they abuse a young boy? Even my own original demon race would never harm a child, for they are a precious resource for the future. Perhaps it would behoove us to take a closer look at the Malachite sisters' report. Albedo sighed and shook her head slightly. It's no use. They also speculated about possible childhood trauma, but they were unable to find out a reason for it. Although, she brought one finger to her lips and thought, the young man did ask an interesting question earlier. About whether or not the ritual would kill him or not. He seemed secretly glad when I told him that it wouldn't. Gresson's eyes cut to her sharply. He was curious about it counting as dying? Albedo backed up half a step in surprise at the demanding tone in her master's voice. Yes, and although he didn't go into detail, he did say that he had a being of power bound to him, and he didn't want to simply release it like that. Gresson's left arm draped across his eyes with a rustle of cloth. His time at war in the Ains-Ulgaun military company came in handy in situations like this. The level of strategy necessary to ensure every member of the original 41-man squad came out of each engagement alive was incredible, and Gresson had been the company's primary strategist. His companions had jokingly called him Mamanga after an ancient general of House Beelzebub who was said to plan so far in advance that some of the things he had contingencies for still hadn't happened. Call Gresson what you will though, he was rarely ever unprepared. But this young man asking about death, it wasn't really unusual. Humans were much more aware of their impending doom than most other races due to their naturally shorter lifespans. However, for some reason this seemed at odds with what little Gresson had seen of this young man. A timid and slightly scared youth that hid behind a well-constructed mask of brash confidence. A mask that may eventually end up becoming truth with enough time. Then there was the comment about a powerful being. After several minutes, Gresson's arm moved away from his eyes. It is possible that there is something that can only be fulfilled by the boy's death. Something that he dearly wishes not to come to pass. And if it is the release of a powerful destructive force, I can certain understand his reticence. Nods of understanding came from all four of the people around his bed. His next words disrupted their trains of thought. But that is not our concern unless he makes it so, Gresson stated firmly, his tone brooking no tolerance for dissent. If, and only if, he comes to us about it, will it become our problem. Until then it is best left in the hands of those three, who presumably have much greater knowledge than we. I say now, let none push any of them into telling us. This is my verdict, and it is final. All four dropped to one knee, a hand coming up to each of their hearts in fealty, and Albedo spoke for them all as was her place as queen of Gresson's peerage. As our lord commands. Suddenly a crippling weight settled on the entire mansion, forcing every servant flat to the floor. Even Albedo and the others in Gresson's room could not rise against the pressure, a power that clearly came from the direction of the room the three humans had been given. But before any of them could get a grasp on just what the pressure was outside of utter fury, it was gone as if it had never been. A stunned Albedo was slow to pull herself back to her feet amidst a sound she didn't immediately recognize. After a few moments she finally pulled her scattered wits together to realize that the sound was Gresson's throaty laughter, a sound that brought both joy and confusion to her heart. It was weaker, more arid than she remembered, but it was definitely his laugh. Weak is he? Nothing special? What say you now, Albedo, Demiurge, and Shalter? That was the unbridled fury the man I have chosen as my successor. Would you say he is worthy now? Gresson demanded, still laughing like a madman, his eyes burning feverishly. It was the gaze of man who had been given a gift far beyond his greatest expectations, and his people shivered to see it. What was that? Shalter's shaken voice asked the question that was on their minds. Gresson calmed down quickly enough. A sudden heavy coughing fit helped in that regard. As he laid back in his prop pillows, he answered them. That was undoubtedly young Naruto's unfiltered killing intent. Something has managed to rouse the sleeping dragon, and I'm quite glad it wasn't me. Albedo's body still shook a little as she tried to calm her nerves. Are you saying that was the anger of a single human boy? Yes, Albedo, Gresson sighed, his eyes closing, that was all that one young man. Now I need to rest. Wake me only if you need me. The four guardians bowed low to the now sleeping figure, and gently let themselves out into the hall, Albedo closing the door behind them. Then she spun to her fellow peerage members, a fire burning in her golden eyes. All right, you all heard Gresson-sama's orders. And while I will abide by them, I want to know what so infuriated that human. Cositus. She faced the hulking warrior squarely. I think that you might have the best chance currently, as one warrior to another. That bond of unspoken martial brotherhood may help you connect enough for him to speak with you. The knight just nodded. That unfiltered killing intent, he had felt a great sadness behind the anger. As a fellow warrior, the least he could do would be to lend an ear. And with this event firmly placing the young human as Gresson-sama's heir, Cositus realized that he should get to know his new prince. Demiurge, Albedo continued, never losing stride, while we cannot importune the human to share his past with us, I feel we would be doing our lord a disservice not knowing more. So you are to seek out anything of use from his former world, every possible rumor. Demiurge nodded, his mind already whirling. This was a mystery, and he did so love solving mysteries. The fact that it was about their new prince just made it all the more imperative to get to the bottom of it. Shelter, Albedo said, after informing Seabass about Gressen-sama's orders. I need you to delve into the library. Look for possible reasons why one human's death could mean so very much. And you? Shelter asked slyly, but not without venom. I will stay with Gressen-sama in case he wakes and requires anything, came the anticipated response. The two of them had been hard rivals for Gressen's affection, but when Lady Kethri came into the picture, Shelter had decided that she could live with being like his daughter. Of course you will, Shelter commented snidely, but quietly. She left quickly. She had her assignment, and only her king, her beloved Lord Gressen, could countermand Albedo's orders. Ah well, at least Seabass is tolerable. Though I still feel like giving him the abilities and position of a rook was going somewhat overboard. The man could destroy buildings with his punch before that. The strength boost from the rook piece was entirely unnecessary. She was already halfway down the hall before she remembered something odd. Demiurge said the boy has a passive sacred gear? We probably should have asked which one meant. It won't matter. Naruto sat quietly in a cross-legged position at the base of the large fountain in the inner courtyard. He had jumped from the third-floor window of the room he shared with Yugao and Konan to get there with as little fuss as possible after his not-so-little outburst. Now he was calming himself through meditation, an art he hadn't yet mastered but did find relaxing. He needed the calming influence of his meditation due to the information he had just received from those folders Yugao had decided to look through, folders that were much more than simple dosers. They were on his parents, and while he was happy to finally have their names, and even pictures, he was incensed about one thing. His father was the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato. The very man who placed the Kyuubi within Naruto at birth, was his father? His own father had doomed him to a life of misery and hatred at the hands of ignorant villagers who understood sealing about as well as Madogai understood fashion. He shoved that to the side, his mind able to process things easier at the moment. He decided to focus on what he had learned about his mother. Uzumaki Kushina, a fiery-tempered woman with bright red hair and violet eyes, but a fierce friend. The only known survivor of the lost Yuzushiogakure, homeland of the Uzumaki clan, who had made a name for herself even in the academy as the red-hot habanero. She was also, not so coincidentally, the previous container for the Kyuubi. His mother had held the powerful fox before him, and apparently it had been because no one but an Uzumaki could properly contain it. Something to do with their naturally high levels of chakra. He hadn't been able to read much more than that. His anger at being used, his entire life, even his own mother's life, by Konoha and the old Hokage, who he had considered like a grandfather, just to hold in a beast of power, became too much and had leaked out. Which had forced him to either vent it, which would probably have been a bad idea, or to find a better way of releasing the rage. Admittedly, he wasn't really thinking clearly at that moment, which was yet another reason he needed to cool off. He knew, subconsciously, that he was missing something, but he also managed to figure out that he needed to calm down before he'd be able to deal with anything more. Alright, calm down, Naruto. You can deal with this. It's no worse than those assholes who tried to teach you that your name was Demon. Let's start with the objective facts, just like Jiraiya and that old Toadpa taught you. First, Mom was Uzumaki Kushina. She was brought to Konoha shortly before the fall of Uzushio specifically to become the container for the Kyuubi, taking over from Senju Mito, formerly Uzumaki Mito. She was later installed into the Konoha Shinobi Academy, in the same class as a number of my own classmates' parents, and Namikaze Minato, who later became the fourth Hokage. Putting him aside for the time being, once Mito passed away, Mom was pretty much left with only her distant cousin, Senju Tsunade, for a family tie. So she did what any child does, made friends. Some were of her year, some weren't. The most notable was a girl maybe a year older by the name of Uchiha Mikoto, who would later become the mother of Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Sasuke. Put them aside as well for later contemplation. Her life was fairly normal, mostly because only a few people knew she was the Fox's prison. Though she was kidnapped sometime shortly after becoming a genin by Kumo bastards, and was rescued by Minato, which is probably what led to their eventual marriage. There wasn't much information on the time between that and my eventual birth, but it's safe to say she was involved at least partly in the Third War, and was more than likely responsible for teaching Minato the seal work necessary to modify the Nidaime's Hiraishin technique so it could be used with those special kunai we learned about in school. Kushina died at the age of 24, a few hours after giving birth. The suspected cause, aside from a massive hole in her body when found, was likely the post-birth removal of the Kyuubi from the seal she held it in. Still, a dying woman was capable of holding the great beast at bay long enough for the fourth to seal it away again, this time within her newborn son. That's a feat that any child can be proud of. The fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato, died as well, also at the age of 24. The suspected cause, once again aside from the giant hole found in his torso, was likely the price of the Shiki Fuin and Hack Fuin Shiki, both of which were powered by the summoning of the Shinigami, who is said to take the soul of its summoner as payment. This in turn left the newborn Uzumaki Naruto to the fumbling incompetence of the aged and retired third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. Hiruzen, in his naivete, felt that the village would see the young child as a hero, and announced the successful sealing of the fox to the masses. This was an unmitigated disaster, as the raw pain of loss was still rampant among Konoha's populace, and thus began the series of events that would shape Uzumaki Naruto's early years of living torture. Naruto shook his head. Wait, I'm getting off track. Can't let my anger get away from me. Or with me for that matter. Moving on. Namikaze Minato, beloved Yondaime Hokage of Konoha. Surprisingly little hard information on him. Orphan of the minor Namikaze ninja family, a supposed offshoot of the Senju. 2. Given the hair and eye colors prevalent in the Namikaze, it's likely they split some time back and interbred with possible other clans. In either case, whether an offshoot or simply a little-known family, the Namikaze were said to have been favored by the god Susanoo, and gifted with powerful storm-like chakra. Side note, might be why the Rasengan is more destructive in my hand than it was for Erosenin. As the only well-known Namikaze, Minato was put on a pedestal early in his career when he was acknowledged as Jiraiya's apprentice and successor of the Toad's summoning contract. Past all of that there isn't much. Hero of the Third War, creator of the Rasengan, and given the credit for the Hiraishin despite his version being just a rather drastic modification of the Nidaime's original technique. Yet despite the lack of information, he was heralded as Konoha's strongest Hokage, and held in nearly the same amount of awe as a god. Died sealing the Kyuubi away into his infant son, along with the child's mother, leaving the boy with no defense against possible machinations. Noted as being an idealist, he most likely believed that the people of Konoha would proclaim the child as a hero, and treat him as a near god. Snort. Another shake of the head. Just how stupid can a person be? I know I wasn't always the sharpest kunai in the bunch, but at least I had the excuse of being taught improperly. He was simply an idealistic moron. Then again, he was taught by Jiraiya straight out of the academy, so I suppose some of Erosenin's personality would rub off somewhere along the line. But did it have to be an utter belief in humanity? Lesson learned, Naruto thought bitterly. Jiraiya's dream was admirable, but about as likely to happen as seeing a pink hippo with purple polka dots dancing the samba. I think I need to find my own path, though I should probably also talk to the toads. Don't want to just up and vanish on them. If they ever found me again, Ma would never let me hear the end of it. But I'll need more space, hey. Guess I'm not so pissed at Dad anymore if I can worry about Ma getting angry with me. With a firm nod, Naruto looked up and saw the two women above him gazing down with worried expressions. He just waved up at them and saw the worry replaced with relief. Standing, he placed a foot on the wall and began to walk back up to them. Perhaps one of the most useful skills, the tree walking exercise. He mused to himself, it is such an undervalued skill, but it really should have been taught in the academy. When he returned to the room, he took note of a new person? Could he call this giant ice blue beetle thing a person? He supposed he had to, considering just how much other weird shit was going on lately. He nodded in acknowledgement of the newcomer's presence. And you are? A blast of frigid air preceded a deep and slightly grating voice. Cocytus, knight of Lord Gresson Asmodai. Knight? Naruto wondered under his breath, then he just shrugged. Well, nice to meet you, I guess. Indeed, the pleasure is mine, Cocytus replied formally. I wonder if you would indulge this warrior's curiosity as to what it was that angered you so much that your killing intent could be felt throughout the mansion. Naruto blinked, then sheepishly rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry about that. Just a bit of information I wasn't expecting that caught me off guard. I'm good now. Oh. He slammed one hand into an open palm. I don't suppose there's a large, like enormous, area that I could borrow for a bit. Preferably out of easy sight? Out of sight? Cocytus let loose another blast of frigid air. What for? Oh, nothing much, Naruto prevaricated, waving a hand like the subject was of little importance. I just need to contact a group of friends, and some of them are rather large. Easily taller than what I've seen of this mansion, come to think of it. It's just that I don't really want to incite a possible panic. If Cocytus had eyelids, he had little doubt he'd be blinking. He'd only heard of a few creatures that would easily stand taller than the Asmodai mansion. Most of them were relegated to mythology. Then again, he himself was, by mythology, supposed to be one of the areas of the underworld of Greek myth, a frozen wasteland no less. 3. Given that fact, he guessed that he shouldn't be surprised that there could be others. He just hoped it wasn't the Hecatonkairs. 4. He didn't want to be the one to explain why those monsters had shown up. Cocytus nodded. There is a substantial space in the mountain ravine behind the mansion. Shall I take you there? Sounds promising, said Naruto with a grin. Lead on. The area Cocytus led the three shinobi to was indeed large enough for Naruto's needs. The fact that it was also an enclosed valley that was owned exclusively by House Asmodai made the space practically ideal. Flipping through the required hand seals, Naruto slammed his hands into the ground. Kuchios no Jutsu. A puff of smoke later, and Naruto found himself being unceremoniously smacked face first into the dirt. Standing in the place of the smoke were two small, but obviously old toads, each rather odd in appearance. One had a purple afro-like hairstyle and the other a white mohawk, and both were garbed in brown robes. The one with the mohawk also carried a staff. Well, it would be a stick to just about anyone else, but it was definitely the proper size for a staff for it. Naruto-chan. What took you so long to contact us? We were starting to get worried when we heard about Konoha, and Jiraiya-chan's name blacked out on the summoning scroll just before that. What is going on? The purple-haired toad yelled in an obviously female voice. Cocytus was starting to wish he had eyelids. He wanted to make sure this wasn't some kind of illusion. Sorry, Ma, Naruto said, rubbing his head and getting into a cross-legged position, but I've had a heck of a time over the last couple days. I actually summoned you both because of certain things that have happened. He spent the next few hours telling the two toads what had all happened to him, and he left nothing out. He found it rather liberating in a sense, as he had rarely unburdened himself like that as a child. By the time he was done he felt drained, and despite already being seated on the ground Yugao and Conan were propping him up on either side. So that all happened, eh? The male, Fukusaku said sadly. That's quite the tale, Naruto-chan. Now on to business. It's clear that you aren't harboring revenge, and this adoption by this devil sounds promising, but I get the feeling you want to ask us something else. Well, yes, the blonde admitted. I was wondering about a few things actually. First, I have to ask if the toads have any knowledge of devils? Of course we do, Shima, the female, said indignantly. All of the summoned clans are yokai. It's just that we tend to hide ourselves in pocket dimensions instead of living in a world that's easily accessible. Fukusaku face-bombed. Shima, we aren't supposed to tell anyone about that. Well, it's too late now. Shima huffed, Naruto-chan needs this, and I'm gonna give it to him. Naruto interrupted before the two could start in on one of their infamous lovers' quarrels. What about this ritual? Could it invalidate my summoning contract with you? Both of the toads blinked rapidly, looked at each other, then back and shrugged, saying together, I don't know. That's unhelpful, Naruto groused. Oh. Fukusaku retracted his staff from the boy's head. We don't know, Naruto-chan, because I don't think it's ever happened before, that a summoner became a devil. Though I'll say this, the House of Asmodai has an excellent reputation. Really? Oh my, yes, Shima said, especially the last head. He really carved a name out for himself. Okay, moving on, would it be permissible for Yugao and Conan to sign the Toad contract as holders for the children? Naruto asked. He may lose the contract or not, but this way his children could still have something of him. Both of the toads shrugged. I don't see why not, Fukusaku stated. Shima patted Naruto on the cheek. We should get going, Naruto-chan. Just know that, whatever choice you make, you have the support of the toads of my boku. The two toads disappeared as they came, in a puff of smoke. Naruto took a few moments to gather himself, and then summoned Gamma, the holder of the toad contract. He taught the two women how to sign it, then they practiced it for a little while, so they could make sure they had it down correctly. He also called in his personal summon and friend Gamakichi, son of the current toad boss, and gave the toad a short rundown on everything, wondering all the while he did, why didn't I just bring him here with the elders? Making their way back to the mansion, Naruto's mind was clear. He had made his choice, and the support of the toads was an important part of his decision. He was going to accept Gressen's offer, but he had a couple small revisions he wanted to make. 3 days after his talk with the Toad Elders, Naruto sat in the center of a large circle that was lit up with a golden light, stripped to the waist. His back and torso were covered in intricate markings glowing with the same golden radiance. Outside the circle sat Gressen Asmodai on a plush throne-like chair, a single vial of dark blood in his hands, chanting in a voice much stronger than what Naruto had heard so far. The incantation reached a peak. The vial of blood became incandescent. The circle rippled, peeling off the floor of the ritual chamber, and began to spin wildly around Naruto. The vial shattered. The blood shot over to Naruto, entering his skin. The circle closed in, the glyphs on Naruto's body glowing brighter by the moment. A soundless explosion. The room fell dark, save for 2 sets of glowing eyes. One of them the vivid purple of Gressen Asmodai. The other The other set of eyes were a glowing silver-flecked blue. 5. Welcome to your new life, my son. An enormous explosion rocked the landscape of the hidden valley behind the Asmodai mansion. A cloud of smoke streaming up from the center of a nearly 30-meter area indicated just how much combusted. And standing some 50 feet from the outermost edge were Naruto and Albedo, he with a raised eyebrow and a wry expression, she with a dumbfounded look. That shouldn't be possible, Albedo muttered softly. Fireball is the first offensive spell any devil learns, and it's never this destructive. Especially on the first try. I told you, didn't I? Naruto asked, his wry expression never changing by so much as a hair. I am incapable of the concept small. The woman shook herself slightly and answered in an odd voice, this goes beyond what I expected. Your affinity for destruction is enormous. You know, as my teacher in the arts of devil magic, I expected a bit more in the way of acceptance for destruction. She snorted, which seemed very out of character for her. The fireball spell is very similar to your world's Hidodama no Jutsu. It is simply not designed to cause this. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I'd ask how you know about some of my world's techniques, but I figure you probably read through, or watched, something from there to give you an idea. The Malachite sisters were very thorough in their reports during their stay in your world, Albedo explained primly. I simply had to read through those reports, and your time adjusting to your new devil body gave me ample opportunity. Plus the extra time that the doctors took to confirm your connection to Gressen-sama. Ah, that would make sense, Naruto noted calmly. He had taken nearly a week to get the feel of his new body. The differences were rather astounding, honestly. The natural increases to his physical limits were offsetting, so he had to retrain his mind to get used to it all. He was also trying to get used to more aggressive hormones, but thankfully he had a great deal of control in that area. Apparently that was one of the major differences between the ritual Gressen used and the evil pieces he had been briefly told about. The pieces would automatically reformat the brain so it could understand the fundamental changes that had occurred and deal with them. Naruto looked forward to getting his own evil piece set. The chance to create a group of people to fight by his side through thick and thin was practically a dream come true. Sure, he'd had comrades in the Konoha Shinobi Corps, but he could rarely feel any real connection with them. Though he'd admit that the first thing he did when he felt comfortable enough was to see if he still had access to chakra. It was possible, considering he left his mother's blood in place, and his euphoria at being proven correct was incredibly high. He had then immediately tried the summoning for the toads, calling his old friend Gamakichi. When the large orange toad appeared, Naruto's joy couldn't be contained. He'd then told Gamakichi his choice, and what had taken so long. The visit lasted for a fair amount of time before the toad had to return, promising to tell everyone in the toad's realm what happened. A shaft of underworld sunlight cut through the smoke and straight into his eyes, causing him to wince heavily. There were two more things he was still getting used to. The underworld's day and night cycles were approximately similar to a well-known human world, but the sun down here only really showed for a few hours, and new devils were barely resistant to its strength-sapping effect. The fact he was still getting used to his new eyes wasn't helping him either. He had opted against waiting to get a new eye for his right socket before the ritual, as there had been one in that jar of murky liquid. Actually, there had been two eyes in that liquid. His mother's, to be precise. The grayish eyes were labeled as final gifts to him from her should he ever find himself in need. Then the ritual somehow fused his two separate eyes into a matching pair of silver-flecked blue, which were surprisingly not unheard of in the Asmodai family line, allowing for Naruto's admittance to the family list to go through without issue. Oh, that had not been a fun dance. He'd been poked, prodded, and bled to the veracity of his claim to the Asmodai name as Gressen's son. The doctors came away only slightly disappointed, however, when they had to admit that his blood was indeed that of the Asmodai family head. Their only vindication came when the mother's blood came out as a human's, instead of Gressen's lady, Kethri. Instead, the detecting spells created an image of Uzumaki Kushina, to which Gressen had pulled one hell of a con. Gressen Asmodai, the head of the Great Asmodai House, general of the Great War, and one of the oldest living devils, had looked to one side and whistled in an innocent fashion. He admitted nothing, only saying that woman on display was one any man would be happy to have been with. Considering that statement neither confirmed or denied a possible liaison, the doctors could only turn away with mutters of agreement. Even a few of the female doctors there had snuck extra glances at the image of Kushina. Naruto still snickered when he thought about it. He was grateful to Gressen, though, for allowing his selfish request to use an extraction of Kushina's DNA in the ritual instead of Kethri's. That genetic extraction was part of what delayed the ritual a few extra days. The implantation of his mother's eye, followed by a distilling of his own blood to separate out his mother's portion, aided by the DNA that was contained in the remaining left eye, and Naruto had been too drained to go through with the ritual any sooner. Naruto-sama. Albedo's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Now that you are paying attention again, I thought we might try another spell. This time it will be of wind, a simple spell to call a breeze to clear this smoke. This should be quite easy. I believe that wind is supposed to be your primary chakra element. Naruto grunted in affirmative. Wind was his only chakra element. It was the one element that his human parents had shared, though his mother had apparently also had a minor affinity for water he hadn't gotten. Well, he had gotten a small affinity for Yin, but it wasn't something he was very good with. Yin was primarily used in genjutsu, not exclusively perhaps, but Naruto still sucked at the illusion skill. As a result, he didn't really practice with his Yin abilities very much. He followed Albedo's instructions, feeling for his new magic and drawing on it to power his spell. Holding one hand palm out, a small golden, circle formed and spun in front of it. A moment later a torrential blast of wind howled through the valley, blowing out the smoke and uprooting several trees in the process. Albedo stared at the destruction with a blank expression. Slowly she fell to her knees, her hands coming up to cover her face as her shoulders shook. This level of destruction couldn't be merely described as natural talent. The fireball spell, yes. This? Not a chance in any level of hell. This seemed more as if her new prince had called the wind, and it had answered like an eager puppy. He can turn a fireball into an inferno, she cried from between her hands, and a simple gust became as a down burst. This dash! Naruto looked at her worriedly. If Albedo lost it, he'd be screwed. Dying or not, he was sure Gressen would leap out of that bed and strangle him to death. The young man was therefore surprised when, instead of breaking down, Albedo jumped up and kissed him. This is wonderful! She exclaimed passionately. With power like yours, House Asmodai can hold its head high. Oh, Naruto-sama! This is beyond what anyone could have hoped for. Naruto eyed her strangely. He knew she loved Gressen, so what was with her practically jumping ship to his side? If it weren't for the fact that she was still clothed, he'd almost expect her to be in heat like a bitch. 3. He shrugged internally. If she wanted him to have sex with her, he probably would just because she was incredibly hot. Damn teenage devil hormones. Unfortunately, at least in his libido's opinion, this was not the case. Albedo pulled away and stood demure once more, her voice again taking on an instructing tone. However, simply because you have power to spare, does not mean our lesson is done for the day. I want to make sure you can make them subtle, scale them back down to their original levels. Naruto winced. Control was something he'd always had problems with. I don't suppose there are control exercises for magic like there are for chakra? He asked hopefully. Of course, Naruto-sama, Albedo replied with a beatific smile. It's called repetition, and practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent, more like, he grumbled. Yet at her glare he started trying to siphon less power from his core, focusing on the fireball spell, as it had caused the least amount of destruction of the two. He focused on the feeling of power, mentally compared it to his first attempt, and judged it to be too much. In a burst of creativity, Naruto decided to try something. His hand came up, the circle lit into existence, and a volley of small balls of flame shot forth, each one impacting the targeted tree trunk in rapid succession. Grinning, he turned to see another dumbfounded expression on his teacher's lovely face. Katon Hozenka, magic style. Albedo sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. How did you manage that? He shrugged. I measured the amount of power as too much, again, but I remembered one of my former teammates' techniques from our Chunin exam, and figured I could easily stagger the released power instead of one giant conflagration. Albedo could feel the headache forming. She had read the reports from the Malachite sisters 3 times over, but she had given little credence to the stories of Naruto's magnetism for on-the-fly tactics. Now she had first-hand experience, and knew she owed the twins something of an apology. Perhaps she could talk Naruto-sama into giving them a small bonus? I'm not getting paid enough for this. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You get paid? No. She shook her head. That's the problem right now. He laughed. Naruto looked around his current setting, which honestly seemed to come out of a B-rate horror flick for a mad scientist's lab. It had nothing on one of Orochimaru's labs, but nowhere else would ever be that level of creepy for him. He was seated on a tall stool across from a frumpy-looking older devil, whose eyes seemed to look right through him. The man reminded him of an older Shikamaru, really. The lazy attitude, but sharp mind behind that, and generally accepting air. This man was an annoying combination of relaxing and off-putting. Ajuka Beelzebub, current holder of the Beelzebub position of the devil hierarchy, and the brain behind the evil peace system. Albedo had decided against explaining the pieces to Naruto, and instead dropped him off on the man who designed it, and the one who personally made each and every set. And who, undoubtedly, was already aware that Naruto was not Gressen's child by birth. If he was as intelligent as Naruto suspected, Ajuka had probably known from the get-go. Ajuka sighed, passing a hand through his messy brown hair. Look, kid Naruto, let's get something straight from the start. I don't care if you're not really Gressendano's offspring originally. You are now Naruto Asmodai. As far as I'm concerned, that's all I need to know. Naruto let go of an explosive breath. Okay, I can work with that. The older man chuckled, and the tension in the air immediately dropped. Alright, now I just have a bunch of questions that I typically go through. Shall we start? Questions? Your answers are inputted when I create your evil pieces, making them easier to attune to you. Ajuka explained. Naruto blinked. That's great and all, but what the heck do the pieces even do? Albedo refused to try and explain it to me more than she felt she had to. Which basically amounted to differences between the pieces and the ritual father used to make me his son. Ajuka frowned slightly. That's odd, she's usually eager to help her master. He sighed and shrugged. Alright, I'll give you the short version. The evil pieces allow a high-class devil to create what is known as a peerage. The pieces are each shaped and named after the pieces in the game of chess. Chess? Naruto interrupted with a curious expression. It's similar to the game of shogi, only fewer pieces, and a few different ones. Ajuka explained, instead of the generals you have a queen tell you what, I'll just tell you the names of the pieces using a standard, non-magical set. The pawn, Ajuka held up a rather boring and small piece. You get 8 of these, each are worth a single point, and a resurrected member doesn't gain much in the way of abilities. The big one, though, is the ability called promotion. This allows them to promote to any other piece except king, either with your permission or in enemy territory. The rook. He held up a castle tower-like item. There are 2 of these. Resurrected members from these gain incredible defense and physical strength, but nothing really in the way of magic. It's worth 5 points. The knight. Here he held up a piece shaped like a horse head. Again, there are 2 of these. Resurrected members from these gain incredible speed, and a body that can withstand the extra forces that such enhanced speed brings to bear. It's worth 3 points. The bishop. This time it was a tall and thin piece that looked like it was wearing a weird hat. Once again, there are 2 of these. Resurrected members from these gain increased magic reserves, and somewhat increased spell potency. This is also worth 3 points. The queen. A piece that was slim with a small crown. Aside from your king, this is often seen as the most important piece. You only get 1, but your queen will gain all the bonuses of the rook, knight, and bishop. It's worth 9 points. And finally, the king. This was a larger version of the queen. This is your piece. It doesn't do much, acting more as a bonding agent and imprinter. This piece is, simply put, a template, something from which the other pieces draw strength and purpose. If the king is too weak, then it's fully possible for dissension to occur, and one of your members could potentially target you for assassination. Now, I'm not saying this is common, Ajuka continued with his hand raised to forestall any questions. I'm saying it's possible. After all, not every devil is as warm-hearted as the Gremory family, or as justice-inclined as your own Asmodai. There are times when a king has had to force a member's cooperation through the use of the old deal. If I win, you fall in line. Naruto nodded. That was something he could understand vaguely. It was similar to the military structure of Konoha, where the stronger and more experienced you were, the better chances you had of being promoted. Hell, he'd heard that the Inuzuka clan had dealt with internal problems like that, with duels and whatnot. It was very much like saying the strong rule, and the weak submit. Old-fashioned, but not without its merits. Ajuka rubbed his hands together. Now, about those questions of mine? Upon his return to the Asmodai mansion with the small box under his arm, Naruto was informed by Seabass that he had a couple visitors waiting for him in the main reception room. When he asked who would be visiting at that hour, it was quite late by that point. Seabass replied with 5 words. Lucifer-sama and the Gremory family. So Naruto hurried to greet his long-waiting guests, who had been waiting for almost the same length of time as he had been stuck dealing with Ajuka. The man had had more than a few questions, and Naruto had spent a great deal of his time there wondering about the possible relevance most of them had. Entering the room where his guests were, Naruto was greeted by the sight of 2 men, one in robes and the other in a white suit, obviously related if their matching hair and eye colors were any indication, one lovely brunette woman, and a napping young red-headed girl. If he didn't know better, he'd have assumed the 2 men were brothers, instead of father and son, though the son had been forced to renounce his family name when he took up the position of Lucifer. On the other hand, the woman was obviously supposed to be the mother of said son, and presumably the girl child as well. Clearing his throat gently, Naruto caught the three older devils' attention. Lucifer-sama, Lord and Lady Gremory. I do apologize for the wait. Had I known of your desire to visit, I would have been here to receive you. The red-haired man in long robes held up a hand to stop Naruto, and the young blonde tilted his head in question. I assure you, Naruto Asmodai, that we have a very good reason for being here without that very warning, and why we were willing to wait as well. The brunette spoke next, keeping her voice low so as to not disturb the child. What my son is trying to say is that the Gremory have come to you for help. Naruto blinked, then took a seat in one of the many comfortable chairs in the room. My help? With what, exactly? I am sorry to say that I'm rather new to position as an heir to a devil house. The man in the suit nodded. We are aware of that, of course. However, there are few we could discuss this with, and fewer we feel we could trust with it. You see, it concerns our daughter here. Gerard Gremory, you would do well to not insinuate that this is any way Ria's fault. Venelana scolded quietly. The man winced. Yes, dear. I didn't mean it like that at all, of course. He ran a slightly shaking hand through his hair. I know it's partly my fault, and none of it falls on Rias. I'm just frustrated with the whole situation, and Rias' refusal. Not to interrupt, but can we get back to why you think I can help you? Naruto asked, a little bit of annoyance in his voice. The married couple had the grace to look sheepish. Venelana opened her mouth to answer, but was interrupted by a soft voice. Mama, can we go home yet? I'm bored, and Naruto-sama isn't here. Young Rias decided to wake up, rubbing one eye cutely as she struggled to sit up. Naruto couldn't help the chuckle that formed at the sight, and the obvious innocence of the child. Well, he called her a child, but he wasn't more than 14 himself, and she looked to be about 9 or 10 years of age, though he could easily tell she would be a real beauty in just a few more years. His quiet laugh drew her attention, and her eyes widened when they saw him. Rias immediately shot up and over to Naruto, hugging his waist tightly. Save me! Naruto blinked, his arms unconsciously wrapping the girl in a hug. He sat there for a minute or two, and finally said the only thing his mind could clearly think of. Say what? Several minutes and a long explanation later, Naruto was rubbing his temples to try and rid himself of a headache. Sighing, he turned to the closed doors. Seabass, could you see if father is able to join us for a little while? I know he's getting weaker, but I don't believe this is something I should do without his knowledge or approval. The door cracked open slightly. I will ask Naruto-sama. The door closed again, and the sound of quiet footsteps could be heard. With a sigh, Naruto sank into the back of his chair. I apologize, Lady Gremory, but as I said earlier, I am still getting used to my position, and while I'm fairly certain I can do as you ask of me, I feel the need for a more practiced mind to advise me. Venelana blinked once. Why apologize to me alone? There are 4 of us here. The blonde chuckled weakly. Yes, but no one cares about the men, while Rias is a young girl once again napping. However, it is bad manners to make a lady wait, so my apology goes out to you. I'm Sirzex Lucifer, leader of the 4 Mao, and yet this boy says candidly, to my face no less, that no one cares about me? The man's sweat dropped while seemingly addressing a wall. Gerard snickered at his son's grumbling. Don't worry about it, son. I hold the title of Duke and I don't matter either. Venelana raised one eyebrow and said with amusement, and young Naruto will hold the title of King. I'd think he would outrank you just a little, dear husband. It's one of the reasons we've come after all. How true, young lady, came a rasping voice from the open door. Gresson was brought into the room in a wheelchair by Albedo, and despite his emaciated frame he managed to give off a presence that easily cowed the other devils. Now, it is rare for my son to ask for my opinion on anything, so perhaps we could get down to business while my strength holds out. Naruto nodded. In short, it seems that Gerard Gremory signed a contract with Rexel Phoenix some time ago that says the heir of Gremory and a scion of Phoenix should be wed to continue the pure-blood devil lines. However, he did so without the support of his wife, Venelana, or the agreement of said heir, which would be the child currently sleeping over there. Now, by tradition he has the right to do anything he wishes with the members of his house, but both young Rias-chan and Venelana-san are violently opposed to the contract. Or at the very least, they highly disapprove of the Phoenix scion that has been chosen. Gresson sighed, and tiredly rubbed his brow with one hand. And? I see that there is obviously a problem, but as you said it is Lord Gremory's right by tradition to do as he wishes with his house. What could they possibly need from us? Certainly it is not too late to cancel the contract in favor of another? Gremory holds the rank of Duke after all, while Phoenix is merely a Marquis. He has the ability. Yes, about that Gerard broke in awkwardly. The contract has stood now for nearly 2 centuries, since the end of the civil war between the devil factions, and while I'm quite certain we were incredibly drunk, the contract has some injudicious terms that make breaking it a very large issue. The old devil turned his attention to him. Such as? The Gremry Lord gulped nervously. The destruction of the house that breaks the contract. Members of House Asmodai as one blinked rapidly, then face-bombed. Dragging his hand slowly down his face so he could see through his fingers, Gressen's voice resonated incredulity. You put the very existence of your house on the line? Gerard grimaced. Not my proudest moment, I will admit. Naruto snorted. No shit. Even growing up among the humans I can barely recall anything quite that stupid. Venelana raised an eyebrow and filed that information away for a later time. So the young prince was raised among humankind? That was interesting indeed. Fortunately for Naruto, she seemed to be the only one to take note of his statement in any way but depressing as both Surzex and Gerard dropped their heads in shame. Son, Gressen's warning tone told the young man that he was approaching disrespect. Naruto had already experienced the punishment for too much disrespect once. He shuddered at the memory. Never again. My apologies, father. Lord Gremry, said Naruto with a small bow of his head to the two devils. Too bad for the older devils, they didn't see Naruto's brief smirk. Gressen nodded in acceptance. Now, what do the Gremry propose that requires my possible permission? Naruto rubbed the back of his neck while smiling a little nervously. They want me to take Rias into my peerage. While she would remain a Gremry in name, it would remove her from the position of heir as it effectively removes her from the Gremry house and Lord Gremry's authority. The elder devil blinked, then threw his head back in a loud barking laugh. Oh, that's a clever little scheme. Yes, that is one aspect of the evil peace system that very few have even considered, and they don't dare change. If they did change it, it could potentially give one house power over another through an heir. Gressen sobered quickly though. However, this move would position House Asmodai between Gremry and Phoenix, forcing us to deal with the situation. Do you understand, Gerard Gremry? You will be placing the future of your house in the hands of my inexperienced son. Lord Gremry swallowed heavily, and nodded. I understand, Lord Gressen, but I have little choice. My wife is unhappy with me, and as a widower I'm certain you can understand how bad that can be for my health. A small chuckle escaped Gressen at the poor joke. Indeed. A happy wife means a happy life, as they say. He paused for a few minutes to consider all the angles, the possible benefits as well as the potential consequences. Certainly this would put the Gremry in his son's debt, and would most likely cause them to support Naruto in a great many things. This alone would be invaluable, but then there was the possible fallout with the Phoenix family, which could breed aggression or outright hatred for Asmodai's interference. Gressen coughed, his lips staining with a small amount of blood which Albedo quickly wiped away. If we do this for you, what are you willing to give us as thanks? Gerard grimaced as if he had swallowed a lemon. He knew this was coming. While he was giving up his daughter, his heir, it was still a request on the behalf of the Gremry. As a result, should the Asmodai agree, the Gremry would owe them some form of compensation that the Asmodai could choose. Who cares about that, father? Naruto interrupted the now tense atmosphere. Sure, we could ask for more, but really, they'll be giving up their child. Even though they'll be able to visit, this will be Rias-chan's new home. Besides, he grinned widely, I think if we can help them, then we should. Gressen frowned. Then why ask my opinion or permission? I wasn't, not really. That was more for Seabass' benefit than mine, Naruto admitted with an insolent shrug. This was more to inform you of the situation, and maybe get some ideas as to what I'd be getting into. Honestly, I was going to accept the request no matter what you said, but your approval would have been a nice bonus. The old man sighed theatrically, and gazed mournfully at the stunned Lord Gremry. You see what I have to put up with? Incorrigible, that's what this boy is. Gressen started chuckling, though in this case I am inclined to agree with him. We will, of course, aid our ancient friends of the Gremry. Little Rias shall join my son's peerage. Surzex, standing to one side of the room during all of this, began laughing. These two. If I didn't know better I'd think that young Naruto really was Gressen Dano's true son. They played us from the very beginning. Gressen played the hardliner, while Naruto was the dutiful son to start, and is now the insouciant brat. I wonder how they were so in sync like that. Gressen's amused expression caught Surzeka's eye, and one eyelid slowly slid down in an unmistakable wink. So the old codger knows I know, huh? Well done, Gressen Dano. This game goes to you. Venelana and Gerard finally seemed to catch on that they were being played with, and began laughing in relief. And if there was a bit of hysteria mixed in, who could really blame them? And with the laughter, Rias awoke again, trying to understand just why her parents were laughing like mad people. Venelana hugged her daughter, they agreed, Rias-chan. You'll be free of the contract, and become part of Naruto-sama's peerage. Ria's eyes widened in delight. Yes. She rushed over to Naruto and threw her arms around his middle. I'll be the best queen. You'll see, Naruto-sama. Whoa there, Naruto stopped her. Queen? I never said what you'd be. Rias blinked in confusion. But, the queen is perfect for me. I'm the heiress of my house, a princess. What else could I be? The blonde shrugged. I dunno, but those points aren't enough to be a queen in my opinion. Well, child, what are you good at? Gresson asked gently. Rias swiveled her head to see the old man. Hello? Who are you? I'm Rias Gremory. And I like anime. Gresson chuckled. I'm Lord Gresson Asmodai, Naruto's father. I'm very pleased to meet you, Rias-chan. Now, my question? The girl blinked again, and said uncertainly, I have the power of destruction. Is that what you mean? Power of destruction? Naruto asked, confused about the term. The name itself was fairly obvious, but what made it special? The Bale family possesses an ability that allows them to destroy pretty much anything at the atomic level, Gresson explained with a wave of his hand. It's fairly impressive to see, but useless if it doesn't hit its target. It is rather slow, but I suppose it would hit anything shy of the average chunin of your world pretty easily. So she's a magic type? Naruto guessed, looking toward the girl's family for confirmation. Venelana nodded. Yes, she has proven to have an aptitude for the magical arts, so she has been training as a wizard-class combatant. Then I think that bishop would probably suit her better, the boy said, one hand stroking a box by his side in an unconscious gesture. Surzax chuckled. Yes, but it's fairly common to use the queen first. After all, they are the ones that are your second in command, and if they've been with you long they tend to get a bit more respect from the others. The mouse shrugged, or at least, that's what most young devils these days think. I know I didn't get my own queen until about 200 years ago, but she was a stubborn one. I'll be sure to tell Grafia you said that, Surzax, Venelana said with a mischievous smile. However, we are forgetting something, Gerard. Her husband grimaced again. I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up yet. Bring what up? Gresson asked. As thanks for your help we were going to hand over a bit of our territory in the nearby human world, Gerard said with a sheepish expression. I was going to mention it on our way out. Naruto raised an eyebrow. One little prank just to feel like you one-upped us, huh? Something like that. Meh, it would have been a good one, Naruto admitted. By the way, son, Gresson started, his voice beginning to grow weak, I assume that your pieces are in that box? Did you get anything interesting? Naruto shrugged. You mean any of those mutated pieces you mentioned before I left? Gresson nodded. Nah, not really. Well, nothing big, rather, Naruto said, just a minor enhancement to a rook and one pawn. Barely a single point of value more in both cases. Gresson sounded satisfied. The boy was his son now, but he didn't want the kid to have too easy a time of things. Now I am tired, and require rest. With that Albedo carefully wheeled her lord out of the room. The others each gave a small bow of respect, and waited a few moments in slightly awkward silence. Naruto popped open the box holding his evil pieces, drawing out a beautifully crafted bishop. Well, shall we get this done with? Then we can all copy my father and head to our beds. Venelana gaped at his pieces. They looked to be from some kind of fantasy set. 6. The pawns were all shaped like dragons, the rooks were towers on mountainsides, the knights were rearing unicorns, the bishops were proud wizards, and the queen looked like a regal miniature of the real thing. The brunette drew a shaky breath. I thought you said you didn't get anything big? Naruto gave her a deadpan stare. I didn't. Father asked about mutations. Those aren't mutations? To the best of her knowledge, the evil pieces only looked like transparent red versions of a standard chess set. Well, these were still transparent and red, but the shapes were breathtaking in their detail. The blonde shrugged. Not really. As far as Ajuka-sama could tell, aside from the shapes, there's nothing special about these. Unless the special properties are hidden just that well, or he didn't want to tell me, of course. Of course, she responded faintly. Now she really needed to go home and sleep. Today had been too much. For a second time that month, Naruto was in the heart of the Asmodai ritual chamber. This time he was alone, and stripped to the waist, the seal on his stomach clearly visible. Grumbling to himself about something not being fair, he closed his eyes and steadied his breathing. He sought his center, the entrance to his mindscape, where he had previously conversed with the being called Kyubi. Opening his eyes, he was greeted with the sight of a dimly lit sewer. A grimace crossed his face. I know that I didn't have the best education, but this is still depressing. You're telling me, a heavy voice came from behind him. Turning, Naruto saw the great fox at rest behind a large cage, head on paws. I assume you've heard everything so far? Heard most of it, still having trouble believing it all though, the fox admitted. Devils, a new life for you, kids on the way from your human life, and now you have the former heiress of another devil family as your servant. Naruto nodded, and with a twist of his will formed a chair to sit down on. Yeah. Wouldn't have believed it either if I haven't been living in it. And apparently, at least according to Demiurge, it's at least partly because of that thing. He gestured to an object embedded into the wall to his right. A small statue of an incredibly fat person made of gold sat in a small alcove, giving off a feeling of incredible luck. A random sacred gear that apparently gifted its bearer with incredible luck in gambling, whether monetary or otherwise. Considering some of the gambles Naruto had taken in more than a few of his fights, he was glad to have it with him. The fox snorted, Daikoku's blessing. 5, a pretentious name to be sure, but it ain't wrong. Never thought I'd actually see one of those stupid sacred gears that biblical bastard created. And in my own host no less. Naruto chuckled, getting the fox's attention. Hey, Kurama, remember when we used to rant at each other? We just couldn't get along. At least until I asked if you had a name besides QB. They both had a chuckle at that. As Kurama thought back to that day, shortly after the training trip with the boys' teacher started actually, Naruto thought about what he had told Yugao and Konan the previous month. He had lied to them. Though he did indeed get vague feelings from Kurama most of the time, he'd actually become great friends with the fox during those conversations they'd had. And though Naruto felt a little guilty, the remembered look of panic on Yugao's face put a small frown on his own. Kurama had a bad rap from the attack he did on Konoha all those years ago, but it honestly wasn't his fault. The trouble is in convincing others of that fact. So what brings you here today, Naruto? The fox asked, genuinely curious. Albedo finally told me what that damn bad Rias has is about, Naruto groused. He had seen the little ball of fur and wings with eyes commonly flying around the mansion and had wondered just what purpose it served. It's called a familiar, and apparently is much like a magical pet that does things for you. A whole range of things from being a companion to handing out those stupid flyers that allow humans to form contracts with us devils. And? Kurama wasn't sure he liked where this was going. I was wondering, the boy began, hope in his voice, if you might be willing to become my familiar. It would probably get you out of this seal without killing me, and allow you to get back into the sunlight and wind you love so much. The fox sat there for a few minutes, obviously thinking things over, before saying in a tone that brooked no opposition, I'll tell you now, brat, I won't be handing out those summoning flyers of yours. Naruto shrugged and waved the comment aside. That's fine. I got an idea to handle that shit. All you have to do is stand around and look badass. Maybe scare the shit out of some people, possibly eat the occasional asshole. Can you do that? Kurama blinked in confusion. Yes, sure. Awesome. Naruto cheered, pumping his fist in triumph. Just what did you have in mind for those flyers, though? Kurama asked curiously. That? I'm gonna take a leaf out of Ajuka Beelzebub's book, the boy said blithely, as if it was of no real importance. You see, I managed to wheedle out of him that he gets all of his contracts done by designing and releasing video games for humans. Each of them has a user agreement that is actually a pretty long-winded version of the general contracts people sign for a completed job. Yeah, heard that. So I figure if he can do that with games, why can't I do that with books? Merely attach a kind of waiver stating that the buyer will not hold anything in the book against me, or something like that. The fox blinked several times, then a vicious grin split his lips. Naruto, it's times like this that make me proud to have you as my vessel. Naruto buffed his nails on his chest in a joking display of arrogance. Why thank you, I do try when I feel like it. The two of them held their respective poses for a moment, then convulsed into laughter together. Finally Naruto pulled himself back up into a sitting position, wiping his eyes clear. Shaking his head he had to wonder what kind of unholy terror he was about to unleash upon the underworld. Alright, enough lazing around, the blonde said, his mirth still clearly evident in his voice. I got the spell from Albedo, and double-checked it with Demiurge and Seabass to make sure I had it right, so I'll see you on the outside soon enough. Yuzuki Yugao, former cat-masked member of Konoha's Umbu Corps, and currently expectant mother, would admit that her day had been pretty good. While it had been a few weeks since Naruto had decided to become a devil, the ritualistically fused blood of Gress and Asmodai causing his human blood to go dormant, neither Yugao nor her counterpart, Konan of AIM, had really had anything to do except keep their skills as sharp as they could. Considering both of them were doing their level best not to chance a miscarriage, the two women had settled for light contact sparring and chakra exercises for the last few weeks to at least keep their bodies in shape. Today had been especially peaceful though. Naruto hadn't caused wanton destruction by accident. Yugao had actually gotten the better of Konan in their spar, and she had just finished an incredibly relaxing bath in the mansion's one divergence from the otherwise European-style design. Oh, that large indoor bath was heavenly. Yugao absolutely loved it. However, all of her contentment and relaxed state went out the window when she returned to the room she shared with Konan, and sometimes Naruto, who had become much like a giant teddy bear for the two women, only to see a very large red-furred fox-like creature napping on one of the couches. Konan wasn't there, but this giant animal, which looked to be about the size of a large pony and looked vaguely familiar, was just laying there, sleeping. However, a memory from when she was only 10 years old surfaced, and she immediately began comparing this creature to that memory. It was something she doubted would ever leave her, if only for the fact that it had been etched in through an intense fear. Tail? 9 of them ears? Long and floppy like a rabbit's opposable thumbs on the front paws, long black stripes around the eyes that looked to reach into the ears. The large fox opened one eye at the sudden draft, then raised its head to look at her fully. Red eyes met brown, and in that moment Yugao knew exactly what Naruto had been up to that day. Uzumaki Naruto Asmodai, you have so much to explaining to do, she muttered under her breath. The fox sweat dropped, rose with a stretch, and slipped out of the room past the quietly fuming woman in search of a peaceful spot to resume his nap. I am not dealing with hormonal human women. Mito and Kushina were more than enough, thank you very much. Kurama muttered as he stalked away. Hold it right there. Remarkably, the fox actually stopped, spine rigid as its head turned back to see the pissed-off woman. With a quiet gulp, Kurama swiveled his entire body back to face her, and dropped to his haunches, his 9 tails waving lazily behind him. Yes? He asked calmly. Yugao glowered at him, aren't you supposed to be bigger? Kurama raised an eyebrow, looking both ridiculous and pitying at the same time. Woman, are you aware of just what it means to be a kitsune? No. He snorted, his expression changing to that of a teacher whose student was failing. It means that I have an innate gift for transformations, illusions, cunning, stealth, and a couple random things my creator thought would be entertaining. In this case, let us focus on the transformation aspect of my previous sentence. Her eyes widened, this a henge? Another snort, not as you humans practice it, of course, but essentially yes. He rose again, and turned to continue on his way. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to find a nice, quiet place, and resume my nap. Sure, Yugao said, her mind racing, and she could feel the headache forming. Quietly she entered her room, and proceeded to the bed. She had quite suddenly discovered a desire to sleep away the madness of the past few minutes. Either that or strangle Naruto, but she didn't want to die just for the satisfaction of wringing his neck. Naruto did his level best to stifle a sigh. For a third time he sat shirtless inside the ritual chamber below the Asmodai mansion. This was getting to be staple of his life lately. Why was there so much that revolved around this one damned room? However, unlike the previous 2 times, he was not alone inside the circle. Sitting across from him, also without a shirt, was his new father, Gressen Asmodai. The withered and emaciated old devil was focusing heavily, eyes closed in concentration, forcing his breathing to remain even as he didn't dare to screw up at this point. Gressen's eyes snapped open and met Naruto's silver-blue orbs. Naruto, this is the final thing I have to give you before my time runs out. The voice was strong, the bearing regal despite the thin form. The old man reached his right hand into his very chest, removing something that looked more like a pulsating gold orb than the heart that Naruto honestly expected. This is the Asmodai family magic, Gressen said, his tone not inviting any form of question. Unlike certain other families, such as the Baal and their power of destruction, where the power is genetic and passed down through the bloodline, the Asmodai concentrate each generation's power and hand that down to the heir. While multiple children can be born with it, only the heir, the one who becomes the head, can actually wield the full power that our family is known for. Generation after generation, parent to child, regardless of gender, the power is accumulated and stored and added to each new heir. This is the ultimate secret of our family, the elder devil continued. This is how we remain and grow more powerful every generation. Each of the heads literally carries all the power of their predecessors, and each adds their own to it when they pass it on. Naruto eyed the glowing ball of golden light warily. The thing was nearly the size of his head. Just how many other heads had there been? How much power was concentrated into that one ball? In fact, It seemed as though Gressen had stopped for a moment, and Naruto seized the opportunity. And what is it? Gressen smiled grimly. It has been called many things over the millennia, God's word, the truth, and many other things that are quite simply incorrect. The true magic of my family, our family, is the power of domination. The blonde raised an eyebrow at that. Domination? Yes, a firm nod accompanied this simple statement. Though it is not as all-encompassing as it may sound, Gressen admitted grudgingly. Each of us can learn to dominate one particular facet, just a single area. For example, I became known for my ability to dominate death. Naruto's other brow flew to join the first. He could clearly hear the quotations around it, but still what dash? Gressen chuckled. It is the primary reason I am still alive, Naruto. I dominated the specter of death that hung over me and made a deal to give me just enough time to get you ready for this. I will most likely not live to see the morrow's dawn. The boy took a few calming breaths, then said, Okay. You say that each one is different? Like how? His new father nodded in satisfaction. It was a fair question. Each of us gains domination over a particular facet of the world at large. My own predecessor, my mother if you're curious, held the power to dominate blood, which for her meant that she could control anyone of her own bloodline. Very useful at the time, as she had to ram her ascension to family head down some very unwilling throats. Naruto grinned. Sounds like a woman I would have liked. Then his face went serious again. Is there any way to guess what I'm likely to get? Gressen shook his head a little. I'm sorry, son. The power itself seems to determine what you most need. I was involved in a few wars, so being able to technically force death away from my allies was beyond price. It didn't always work the way I thought it would though, the old man cautioned. There were many friends I couldn't help more than to give them a chance to set a few affairs in order. The degree of injury was directly proportional to my ability. In my case, I'm not injured, I'm just old. Naruto was about to ask something else, when Gressen coughed heavily and held up his free hand for silence. The blonde nodded. Now was not the time. Most of what you'll need to learn about the history of this power is in the library, Gressen said as soon as he had caught his breath. Now take it, my son, and let no one ever stand against you. If they try, knock them down and continue over their cold corpse. Naruto nodded firmly, and reached out. Taking the large orb of power in his hand, he felt something probing his mind, his heart, and even his soul. It wasn't invasive though, rather it felt like a new friend trying to get to know him. Without further pause, Naruto slowly began pushing the sphere into his own chest, and a feeling of warmth suffused him. His eyes closed to revel in the feeling, almost like a piece of him had been missing and was now returning to him. When he was done, when the last of the glowing ball had disappeared, the circles on the floor darkened, and Gressen Asmodai fell to one side. The sound of the old devil's body hitting the floor brought Naruto out of his peaceful moment, and he rushed to his devil father's side. Quickly Naruto called for help, and Albedo came running. Together the two of them got Gressen into bed, and sat on opposite sides. Naruto would admit that he hadn't known the old man for very long, barely a month, but he already felt like more of a father to him than the nebulous human man who had actually sired him. And losing that new father now, Naruto felt the loss keenly. If only I'd had more time to know him. He felt a small tickle-like sensation around his heart, but shrugged it off. Weird shit was always happening to him lately. The passing of Gressen Asmodai, the Mamanga of the widely recognized Ain's Gown Military Company, and head of the Asmodai family of the 72 Pillars, was heralded by an underworld-wide wake. The entirety of the devil, demon, and many other races that formed the underworld's community bent their heads in respect to the death of a man whose reputation reached even into the heavens. However, despite the width of his fame, many were surprised when heaven actually sent a representative to the 24-hour memorial time. In point of fact, heaven sent 3 representatives: Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, and Archangel Uriel. Each were resplendent in the white robes that declared them to any with the slightest brain as 3 of God's most powerful and trusted people. Each set of robes trimmed in what was pretty much known as their individual colors: Michael's gold, Gabriel's silver, and Uriel's sky blue. They even had the decency to mute their natural auras of divine grace so as to not cause the devils in their vicinity any undue problems. At the end of the wake, when the time came for speeches of remembrance, the 4 Mao, leaders of the devils, stood and each spoke. Serzux Lucifer gave a stirring story about his time working with Gressen in the war. Ajuka Beelzebub told of learning science at the deceased's hand. Seraphal Leviathan spoke of how he gave her the confidence to even join the war and later to pick herself back up after it was over, and Falbium Asmodeus spoke of how much he had learned of strategy from him. Following them came the 3 angels, each with a different outlook on one of the few elder devils to gain heaven's respect. Michael told of Gressen's unwavering determination even in the face of terrible odds, a mutter of 3 to 7 being not quite low enough. Uriel said little, other than a short tale of just how Gresin had earned his respect. And Gabriel, the only female angel that many of the devils could actually name, told of Gresin's utter conviction in making sure every soldier under his command came home. It was during Gabriel's story that Naruto recalled something about her being the angel of death, the final escort of the dead to their resting place. He wasn't sure if that was quite true, but for the sake of his late adoptive father, he could hope that she had been the one to lead him to wherever he went. The long blonde locks of platinum gold, the large and soft blue eyes, and a body that put even Albedo and Sarah Fall to shame, that was some very fine eye candy. Man, he tapped that given even half a. Damn teenage hormones. When it was finally Naruto's turn, as Gresin's recognized heir, he had to speak, and Albedo had insisted that he do a kind of eulogy. As many of you know, I was found by my father barely more than a month ago, he started. I'll admit that while I didn't know Lord Gresin for long, I'm certain I knew him well. Certainly I liked him a great deal better than the man who raised me, but what can you expect of a human who knows you aren't his? A few scattered chuckles met that statement. It wasn't really a secret that Naruto had been raised by humans. Most found it more surprising how well he was fitting in with his new position. It threw enough of the parliament for a loop that he managed to get his position as Gresin's heir through all the proper channels without issue. Like I said, I didn't know Lord Gresin Asmodai for long, Naruto continued, his voice strong, but I feel as though I knew my father Gresin all my life. He lived as he felt was right for him, walking the way he talked, you could say. It certainly showed in the way he took in so many after the wars, in how he comported himself in his daily life, and finally how he stoically looked death in the eye and told it to take a hike until he felt I was ready to continue leading the Asmodai name. He paused for a moment, idly noting that he had absolutely everyone's attention. This is not a time of lamentation, this is a time of remembrance. I for one will always remember my father's strong will, and the convictions upon which he built his very way of life. The underworld has lost a great man, the heavens have lost a worthy opponent, but I have lost a father. Gresin Asmodai meant many things to many people, and while he will be missed, he will not be forgotten. And while I have lost a father, he left me a family in the members of his house and peerage. My father is dead, but my brothers and sisters, and I myself, still live. We will continue his legacy, we will not allow ourselves to fall by the wayside, and we will never leave behind the justice that our house has always stood for. Naruto looked at the open coffin containing the body of his deceased devil parent, and snapped a crisp military salute, followed shortly by every other man and woman who ever served alongside or against Gresin. So I say, Gresin Mamanga Asmodai, wherever your spirit has gone, you may rest in peace as your will lives on. After Gresin had been entombed in the Asmodai family crypt, Naruto found himself surrounded by the 3 archangels along with the 3 male Mao. Thankfully he wasn't alone, as Albedo, Cocytus and Rias found their way to his side as silent support. Though Cocytus could be described as intimidating under most circumstances, his posture of an obvious guard put the angels and Mao at relative ease. Surzek swirled a bit of wine in a glass. He hated funerals, but the after-parties for the remembrance of the deceased's life were always rather interesting. So many little nuances that never popped up in other conversations could be viewed in these rare times of shared humor. And he meant humor, because the stories that came out during these remembrances were inevitably some of the most hilarious events. I wonder, young Asmodai, Michael was saying, catching the other's attention, have you discovered your own particular brand of your family's magic yet? I find myself quite curious. Naruto shook his head with a grin. Not yet, I'm afraid, Michael-sama. The power itself barely awoke a few days ago, so I haven't really had the time to try it and see what I have. Gabriel giggled, a glass of orange juice in her hand. Awoke? Come now, all of us here are aware of how the Asmodai magic is passed along. The blonde boy grinned. You may be, Gabriel-chan, but the others listening in are not. He indicated people beyond their group shamelessly leaning ear in their direction, so to keep the family secret, I'm sticking with awoke. The blonde angel giggled again. Oh? Chan, is it? You really were raised by the Japanese then? Your name is certainly Japanese enough. Though who would name their child after a ramen ingredient? Naruto shrugged a little at close enough. And it's maelstrom, not fish cake. Uriel raised a brow, then gave his own grin. Close enough? Then you were raised in another world that has Japanese roots? The teen laughed, as expected of you, Uriel-sama. Got it right on the first try. Indeed, the world I was raised in has roots and traditions very similar to that of this Japan I have heard about. Uriel smiled with a twinkle in his eye. Perhaps you'd care to go into some detail at a later time? I'm always interested in learning about other worlds. Naruto shrugged again. I don't see why not. Just because I can't go back, it doesn't mean I can't tell you about it. Make an appointment with Albedo, and be sure to leave a fair amount of time. There's a lot of information. Uriel raised an eyebrow. And why would you be unable to go back? The teen blonde grimaced. It's all connected. I'll just say it again, make an appointment. 1. I'll do that. I wasn't aware that you'd started your peerage already, Naruto Dano, Falbium said, interrupting the flow of the angels. Took in Albedo and Cocytus, did you? And the young heiress of Gremory? Quite the collection start. Naruto shook his head and gestured to Albedo, who spoke up. I'm afraid you're mistaken, Falbium-sama. Neither myself nor Cocytus have joined Naruto-sama's peerage. Oh? The Mao asked lightly, then young Rias is his queen? I'm Naruto-sama's bishop, Rias said proudly, her hands going to her hips and her head tilting imperiously. That's unusual, Ajuka quipped, normally the first piece used is the queen. Naruto grinned. I never was a fan of following the grain, though I'll admit to making certain exceptions. What about the situation with the Gremory and Phoenix? Uriel asked. Almost everyone knew about the standing contract between the two devil families, and he was curious as to how Naruto had resolved it enough to take the girl in. I have an appointment with Lord Phoenix next week to discuss that very topic. I'll deal with it then. Another shrug, I'll probably have to step on more than a few toes in the process though. With a round of chuckles the talks moved on to the appropriate stories to remember Gressin, and Naruto found himself enthralled by them. He knew Gressin had done a lot, but now he was finally getting to hear about it. The day following Gressin's funeral found Naruto in a reinforced practice room, designed specifically for the use of the Asmodite power of domination. He couldn't help but wonder why other brands of magic or physical exercises couldn't also be done in there, but figured it had to do with the odd markings all over the walls, floor, and ceiling. Hell, they even ran over the inside of the door. Which made perfect sense in hindsight, as it didn't make for a safe practice room if the power could just get out through the door. Naruto was sweating heavily, having failed drastically to access the power Gressin had given him. It wasn't as if he couldn't feel it, more like it was playing with him, trying to gauge his reaction to being denied. It was, putting it lightly, infuriating. Dropping heavily into a cross-legged position, Naruto growled in frustration. He didn't understand, it was just power, wasn't it? It couldn't really have a will of its own. Could it? In desperation he figured trying to talk with it couldn't hurt. He focused on the power he could feel within him, and thought hard at it. I don't have time to be playing. I don't have enough time to learn everything I need. I just don't have time. I need what you can give me, and I need it now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. He could feel something resembling startlement come from the power, swiftly followed by curiosity. Then, as if to mock him, he swore it responded to him in a childlike innocence. Time? Then give you time. Give you all of time. Time will be yours to play with, then you can play with us. Naruto blinked. Talking to it had worked? Wait, what did it mean? What do you mean, give me time? We give you time to rule, then you play with us. We will allow you to dominate time. Dominate time? Yes. Then you play with us. Naruto could feel a headache forming. Was this how Iruka-sensei felt all those years ago? If so, he owed the man a serious apology if they ever met again. Play? Yes. Play. You use power. Using the power we give you means you use us, and that is how we play. He felt his eyebrow twitching. So to use his power he had to play with it? Groaning, he rubbed his temples, the headache now fully formed. Fuck an apology, he owed Iruka-sensei a keg of ale. Then he asked possibly the most important question. So how do I play with you? He felt the power's joy. We show you. Sales of your Ika 2 books are up almost 90%. An enthusiastic man in a gray suit said from behind a desk. The public loves them. They're especially popular among young couples and newlyweds who have written in saying that their love lives are even better now since reading even just one. The publishing industry is clamoring for more. Even the ones overseas that we're getting to translate want to get in on the ground floor of the series. Naruto stifled a groan, his headache from the day before returning with a vengeance. He had finally gotten his power to play with him, and had discovered that it spoke literally. He developed the ability to dominate time by causing it to stop within a certain area or focused on a single person. There were a couple huge downsides though, the most notable being the enormous strain on his reserves the longer he held it active. But it was a point like this that he wished he could speed things up. Wait, why couldn't he? It fell in the realm of time, so he should be able to do it, right? Better not test that theory right now. The human might get suspicious if his speech ended too quickly. Naruto noticed the man looking at him expectantly. Oh, he was already done. He cleared his throat to cover up that he hadn't really been paying attention. I'll think about it, Naruto said, using a simple blanket term to cover himself. How about the release forms? They are being signed with each single book, right? I don't need anyone coming after me for some kind of idea that these books are merely demeaning women. Release forms. Yeah, right. They were, in actuality, a convoluted runaround that acted as a pre-contract. Considering none of the books had been returned yet, or given away to used bookstores, the hidden contracts remained valid and Naruto collected energy from the human's lustful desires whenever another book was purchased. Yes, I meant to talk to you about that. The publisher looked nervous. Are they really necessary? I mean, everyone loves your work, even if you are going under another name. Why would you need such a thing? Naruto waved his hand in the air and smiled disarmingly. Don't worry about it, Mr. Publisher. It's just my paranoia acting up, and making me protect myself from any potential fallout. It is a fickle business, after all. Mr. Publisher chuckled. All right, but are you sure you need them for that first book of yours? The Tale of a Gutsy Ninja is a bestseller, you know. And there isn't really anything offensive in it. Another wave of Naruto's hand met the question. Don't mind it, please. That one's more of a disclaimer, letting people know I'm not collecting the money for that one. The man blinked in surprise. You're not? Then where's the money for those sales going? Naruto chuckled, straight into world relief projects. It was my godfather's dream to help bring peace to the world, so I figured that putting the profits from his first work to that goal would be appropriate. The man smiled. How magnanimous of him. I take it he was an idealist? Of a sort, Naruto admitted, but by the time he had finished the first book, he'd become somewhat resigned, I guess is the best term, to what he perceived as humanity's foolishness. Humanity's foolishness? All the wars, fighting over things that really won't last, religion, the almost intrinsic need to be seen as better or more successful than others, being unwilling to help others simply because they don't look right or aren't what we want them to be. Naruto shrugged. It's all fairly stupid if you think about it. Yet humanity persists with these and more. Mr. Publisher looked more than a little uncomfortable at the topic, and tugged at his collar. Yes, I see your point. Moving along, I assume you're here to submit the next installment? Naruto smiled, pulling a volume from an inside pocket of his own dark blue suit. Jiraiya would be so proud that his work was such a popular item in this world. Naruto just dreaded the time when he'd probably be forced into writing the next book just to keep things rolling. Naruto-sama, how exactly do you plan to fill your peerage if you don't look for suitable members? Albedo asked as they were finishing up one of his lessons in magic. He grinned in response. I'm taking a leaf out of Father's book. You remember, of course, how he sent the Malachite sisters to find the best possible heir they could? Albedo nodded. Of course she remembered. What did that have to do with anything, though? Well, I've set Yugao, Konan, and Kurama to watching through a kind of viewing portal for appropriate members that can be found in other worlds. Oh. She blinked in shock. Why hadn't any other devil thought of doing this before? When she asked this question, Naruto chuckled. Probably because we don't belong there, those other worlds reject us after a while, he explained. It is only because of the magic of this world, the rules so to speak, that I can stay here. Since Father made me his son through a ritual, which gave me a kind of citizenship here, I won't be rejected now. But in those other worlds, I would be a transient visitor at best, and overly interfering is likely to piss off the rules there. Those rules then force us out of that other realm and back to where we belong. But no such problem exists with the nearby human world, she protested. He nodded. Yeah, that's because it is bound up in the same realm and rules as this underworld. So there is no rejection. Albedo had swirls in her eyes as she tried to understand, and failed. This caused Naruto to chuckle and pat her head lightly, which elicited a small blush from her. He was her new master, and Albedo was already seeing him in that light. Some of the others, most notably Shelter, were going to take more time to get used to him, but Albedo would do her duty, such as she saw it. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, Albedo. Naruto smiled widely at her, forcing his eyes closed. It's complicated. Just trust me when I say that I doubt heavily that I would be able to visit any particular world more than once for a short period. Yes, Naruto-sama. Sit around and look badass, he said. Kurama grumbled as he watched images of different worlds fly across the pane of a floating mirror. Maybe scare the shit out of some people, he said. Ha! Then why am I doing this? Oh, be quiet, Kurama, Yugao stated irritatedly. I don't really want to do this either, but this belly of mine is starting to get in my way. It's not supposed to be this big yet. I'm barely more than 2 months along. Conan snickered from her position beside the purplet. Hey, I'm almost twice as big as you are, and you don't hear me complaining. At least we're doing something, instead of just being lazy. Do either of you actually know how he's got his fingers in so many worlds? Yugao asked, changing the topic, the air quotes easily heard. Kurama nodded with a grin, the sight of his sharp teeth sending a shiver up the women's spines. He sealed each of his evil pieces into individual summoning flyers, each one set to activate only under certain conditions, and then threw them out into a dimension-crossing spell. The spell itself was set to randomize the location for each of the summon packs, so there isn't likely to be any overlap. The two women nodded, both with looks of understanding. It was basically Naruto doing something rash and foolish again, sending out uncontrolled random deals. At least each of them was sent to a different world, that way there was no possibility of two former enemies being brought in as his peerage members. Kurama's eyes lit up in glee. Oh, it seems we have our first one. Kurama, just what are the conditions that he set those flyers for? Yugao asked as her attention was captured by the image in the mirror zeroing in on one particular window. Kurama's grin darkened with a hint of evil respect, death, and despair. 3. She didn't understand what was going, or why it was happening. She had served faithfully, hadn't she? She had fought with all she had, and had just found the strength to fight on when her lord had appeared in front of her and almost cut her in half, leaving her to fall to the ground from several hundred feet in the air. Her mind flashed through what she could remember of her life as she lay upon concrete. Her first real memory being that of a ravenous hunger. A hunger for souls, preferably the souls of the still living. A hunger that she had sated at every turn, the souls devoured giving her more power with each one she ate. Then came a moment when her hunger abated, allowing her to think clearly for the first time, and she wondered just what the point of it all was. Sure, eating the souls of those human creatures gave her power, but why did she crave it? Why get all that power, if there was nothing to do with it? And really, there wasn't anything she actually wanted to accomplish. She was just gaining strength and power for the sake of satisfying the hunger within her. The memories unfolded further, her body changing again and again, each time becoming more powerful, more individualized. She wasn't anyone else, she was herself. She was unique. She was alone. In that moment she had a new hunger awaken within her, a hunger for companionship. That hunger evolved into a desire to be seen for herself, as a unique entity. She now craved not just the concept of company, but of recognition. Over the span of several years, at least as the humans viewed time, she gathered to her side 3 others. Each of them as unique as she was, but not as powerful. Their strength was more ephemeral, and in a world where the strongest survived by eating the flesh of the weak, they were pretty much bait for anyone on her level. The oddest thing in her mind was that they were each female, and hated anything that was male with a passion. But by whatever god may exist, they were annoying, always squabbling over the slightest thing, only ever agreeing when she broke them apart. However, they were her responsibility, her friends, her family. She vowed to protect them. They would be her reason for becoming stronger, for getting more powerful. She would sacrifice everything for them. Then came that arrogant asshole. She had driven him off once before, but he apparently hadn't taken the hint. But this time something was strange. He was stronger than he should have been able to get in such a short time. It was confusing, and the surprise of it got the best of her. He beat her. He had her dead to rights, on her knees, ready for the finishing blow. A blow that never came. He had saved her from the bastard. He blasted the beast into oblivion. He offered her his hand, and even more power, a power that she could use to make sure something like this never happened again. She took it, and followed him, swearing her loyalty and service. She gained power, and he gave power even to her family, and they continued to follow her. She was their leader, their mother, they remained her responsibility. She was content. She gained more power over the following years, and rose among the ranks of his servants to the 3rd spot. She stood just 3 places down from him. He revealed plans to go to war, to fight against an injustice that should have been solved long before. And she was the first to agree. She had sworn to serve him, and if this was what he wanted, then she would gladly lead the charge. But he had other plans for her, and the others that stood in the top 3 with her. They, along with him and a couple others, would act as a diversion to draw out the most powerful enemies. They would destroy the enemy generals, then continue on to correct the injustice of their world. The plan had gone perfectly. The enemy indeed sent their strongest to do battle. And though she was forced to watch her family fall to the blade of the lead enemy general, she found herself in battle with a white-haired youth. They both used water as their weapon, They both manipulated the molecules of the air to form their attacks. It was a stalemate. Then the boy did something she didn't think possible. He manipulated the very weather. He changed the once sunny day into an overcast storm cloud that unleashed small snow particles. But this wasn't normal snow, no. Wherever it touched, it transformed into flowers of ice. These crystals built quickly, and many of them formed upon her own body, and eventually she was trapped within a giant ice crystal made of many tiny flowers. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move even the smallest of muscles. She was frozen. But her lord was still out there. He still needed her. She had failed her family, but she could not fail him. She dug deep within herself, and found, to her great surprise, a power of her own sleeping. She grasped it. She forced it to awaken. And she was once again reborn. Her prison of ice shattered. She stood on air proudly in her new body. She flashed to the side of her lord. Then blinding pain, both physical and emotional. He stared at her with contempt, a sneer that wounded her heart. His sword was covered in her blood, achieved when he almost bifurcated her. His voice breaking her heart with his final words as she fell. I have no need for a failed pawn to return. You should have just stayed dead within your prison. Now she lay bleeding out, her heart in more pain than she thought she could bear. The physical wound didn't even hurt in comparison. Her lord, her savior, had thrown her out with the trash. It made no sense. She had found this power within her for his sake. Also, she could still serve and protect him. Why was he throwing away her loyalty, all her years of service? Did it all mean nothing to him? Finally, she felt her strength ebb. Her eyes closed. A single tear fell from beneath her eyelid. Her heart screamed within her, the loneliness and betrayal taking one last turn. Her lips parted, and a soundless whisper came from between them. Someone save me. In that instant, a flash of golden light enveloped her, and time stood still. Her eyes snapped open, her pain all but forgotten in surprise. Before her stood a young man, a blond boy who appeared to be in his mid-teens as humans reckon things. He had a small sad smile, and his silver blue eyes held an understanding so deep her heart instinctively knew he felt her pain. Well, before I get to anything else, I believe introductions are in order. He sketched a courtly bow, his gaze never leaving hers. My name is Naruto Asmodai. I have come in response to your request for someone to save you. She blinked, but her stare refused to leave the view of his eyes. Eyes that revealed a great deal of intimate knowledge of the feelings of pain, heartbreak, and betrayal. Emotions that currently coursed strongly within her breast. The fact that he knew them so well was what probably persuaded her to speak. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was only a few moments, she found her voice. A sweet, soft-sounding voice that belied the strength of the woman who possessed it. Tir Haribel. Trace Espada. Tir-san, may I call you Tir-san? He received a nod and continued, I'll admit that I'm rather new at this whole saving people thing. Especially the near-dead, like yourself. But I suppose I should really ask what you are willing to give up in return. Tir blinked again. This was an unusual boy. He had no doubt that he could save her. Save her from death, and maybe more than death. She firmed her resolve, her expression showing her conviction. Everything. Naruto rubbed his chin. Everything, you say? Are you sure? That everything includes not only giving up your world, your body, or your very soul, you know? This is quite literally a deal with the devil. Tir's expression didn't so much as twitch. Yes. I will give you everything I have. Everything I am. Under one condition. The boy raised his eyebrow. A condition, huh? And just what do you want, besides not dying? I can see by your eyes, you know the pain I feel right now. You know it well. He didn't give any acknowledgement, but she saw him tense slightly. Obviously this was a sensitive subject, but she pushed on, I want your sworn oath. I do not wish to feel like this again. If you save me, I will give you my all and everything. In return, you swear to never betray me like him. Naruto stood for a few moments, his eyes closed in thought. Or so she believed. When his eyes opened again, Tir saw his answer in those expressive orbs. He held out a hand to her, and it was a transparent red object that looked like a female warrior. It was a fitting image in her mid. Very well, Tir Haribel, you have my word. Our contract is formed. You will become my queen, my second in command, serving me with everything you have, and in return I swear to never betray you. You will stand by my side, in the most important role, and make certain that I keep my promise. Without taking her gaze from his, Tir reached out and grasped the item in a tight fist, not even taking into account that she could move again. A red light glowed faintly from between her fingers, and she felt the piece become part of her. She felt the power, the strength, the renewal of her body as the open wound in her gut closed. She could feel it changing her, the hole in her lower abdomen vanishing, for, as she was remade from a hollow into whatever this item was turning her into. A devil, she supposed, as that was what Naruto had called himself earlier. But more than all of that, Tear felt herself connect to someone else. She could now feel Naruto in a way that she had never experienced before. Her heart felt his emotions, one incredibly strong that she didn't recognize, and she felt herself cling to that one incredibly strong feeling. She was no longer hungry for souls or power, no longer hungry for a reason to exist. This young man would be her reason, her heart's support. She was full now, full of his emotions, his very presence. And she felt no regret. Her former lord had thrown her away, tarnishing any attachments that may have remained. Her new lord, her king, she could feel it now. This young man would not betray her, he would never forsake her. Tear buried her face into his chest and cried. She cried tears of relief. Tears of joy and fulfillment. She would never be alone again. This man would forever be with her. He would never allow her to feel the pain of loneliness again. And in that moment, Tear vowed to herself. She would never let him feel alone either. Whatever he asked of her, she would do with a glad heart. In that moment she promised to forever be his. Naruto Esmedai's queen, Tear Haribel. Tear Haribel felt distinctly strange upon her consciousness returning, having fallen asleep soon after accepting that strange young man's help. She didn't feel empty, hollow, hungry anymore. Instead she felt invigorated, and she reveled in it. It was such a feeling of fulfillment that she almost wanted to sing. Granted, the hunger was mostly gone already when I became Arrancar, but it was still there. She thought, her muddled mind slowly marshalling itself despite an inner wish to simply bask in the sensation of being hunger-free. She could feel that she was in a remarkably soft bed, with the softest of covers over her body and plumpest of pillows beneath her head. It was odd, she had never really bothered with any sort of real comfort before, preferring to simply sleep on a kind of stone slab. So finding herself in this level of luxury, she decided to just enjoy it for the moment. As her consciousness returned more fully, she could feel that her body was naked beneath the coverlets. It was strange that she felt no amount of embarrassment though, when the thought that her new lord might well have been the one to strip her while she was out cold. She had always held something of a wary understanding of men, and this one was bypassing all the walls she naturally put up that even her previous boss hadn't passed so easily. Squirming slightly, relishing the feel of the soft sheets on her, one hand unconsciously trailed down across the plane of her smooth stomach to her lower abdomen, where the hollow hole was supposed to be. Tear's eyes snapped open in shock when her hand encountered nothing but more smooth skin. Her hole was gone. How? Was this part of what that boy, Naruto-sama, had done to her? Was this what he meant by giving up even her body? What about the comment about surrendering her soul as well? Did she still possess her powers as a hollow, as an espada? Was she now just a weak little thing, unable to protect her silent vow to never allow Naruto-sama to be alone? A quiet snore broke her from her runaway thoughts. Her gaze moved to the side of the bed she occupied, and saw her new master asleep in a chair, his head resting on the bedside. A small trail of drool out of one corner of his mouth told her that her lord was still asleep, and probably had been there for a long time. Tear couldn't help herself, and a small smile made its way onto her lips. Her master looked adorable like this. His golden blonde hair as messy as she remembered, snoring lightly with a little bit of drool, and her right hand clasped tightly in his own. Wait, what? She looked again, and sure enough, he had her right hand held in his. Her smile grew from a small one, into one of gentle amusement. It was too bad that he never see her smiles, she thought, the bone fragments would hide her lower face from him. You should smile more often, it really highlights your beautiful face, a young masculine voice said, startling her. Her gaze refocused on Naruto's face, and saw he had a smirk and one eye open. When did he wake up? And how did he without her noticing? Then his words hit her, and her free hand flew to her face. She expected bone reminiscent of a shark. Hard. Unyielding. Instead her questing fingers were met with soft skin, softer lips, and the feel of her chin and cheekbones. Never mind that she already knew that her hole was gone, this was just too much to hope for. How dash? Her confusion and wonderment evident in her soft tone. Naruto's smirk widened as he sat up and stretched a little, never letting go of her hand. Whatever race you were, you are now a devil. And no devil will live with a permanent hole in them, or with those bones blocking their mouth. The queen, the evil piece I used on you, reincarnated you as a perfect devil, rather than leaving you as you were. Devil? MHM, he hummed, settling back into his chair. I said it, didn't I? You were making a literal deal with the devil. The devil in this case being myself. Welcome to an unknown spot on the food chain. Unknown? He shrugged and his grin seemed to widen further. I'm not entirely certain where we devils stand in the grand order of things. There are some who would claim to be at the top, but I really don't believe them. Then there are those who would say that we are the scum of the earth, that we don't even deserve to exist. Yeah, I don't agree with them either. Personally, I figure we're somewhere in the middle. He said it all with such a cheerful tone that Ter couldn't stop a small giggle. He painted such an interesting picture with his words, and she found she suddenly didn't really care if she didn't have her hollow abilities anymore. She would be just as glad to start fresh if this was the kind of man she was standing with. Aqua met Silver Blue, and Ter found herself drowning in his emotions. Fear that she would reject him for something, hope that she would accept the situation. Trepidation and excitement in equal measure. She reached out her free olive-skinned hand, at least her skin hadn't changed color on her, and cupped his still grinning cheek gently. Naruto-sama, you have nothing to be worried about. Remember our contract, so long as you do not abandon me, I shall stay by your side. His grin disappeared, and a look of confusion replaced it. How did you know what I was thinking? It was Tear's turn to be confused, her hand coming back to rest on the sheets over her heart. I can feel you. Your emotions are as plain to me as the sky. She cast a puzzled look at him. Is this not what was supposed to happen? He shook his head. No, everything I've read about the evil pieces, nothing like this was mentioned. What do you think it means? She was worried now, and it was scaring her. She hadn't had to deal with real emotions in so long, and what few she'd still had as a hollow were well controlled. Naruto quickly reached out and grasped her hand in his, sending a feeling of reassurance to try and calm her wildly beating heart. No need to worry, Ter-sen. We'll figure it out, nay? Together. Her fear vanished like water in a desert, her heart calming in contentment as she felt his assurance across the bond. She spent a few minutes making certain that she was indeed calm, silently reveling in the feelings she was receiving, then nodded yes. Together. A sudden look of consternation crossed his face, and Ter could feel a small amount of annoyance and resignation from him. Oh, I hope it's not the pieces. Ajuka told me there could be something strange, but this? Ter sat up, ignoring the absolutely clear view of her naked upper body that she was giving Naruto. What do you mean? Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair even as he tried to find somewhere safe for his eyes to look, finally settling on her face. The set of evil pieces I have, the queen I used to reincarnate you as a devil? It's not exactly a standard set. For one thing, they are supposed to look like red versions of those. He waved a hand at a standing chessboard, complete with both sides of white and black pieces already set up. The pieces didn't look like anything, really. You could tell each of the 6 types of pieces apart easily enough, but beyond that they didn't look like anything special. Certainly nothing like the incredibly detailed piece she had absorbed. Was that what happened? With an internal shrug, Ter figured that was probably as good a term as any. I was told that the set I got may have additional complications due to the differences they held from the standard, Naruto admitted sheepishly. But they were made especially for me, so I didn't really see a reason not to use them. He paused for a moment, that and I highly doubt I'd be allowed another set. So I have to use what I have. Tear's mind was running a mile a minute. She wasn't a stupid person, not by a long shot. She was of an extremely logical mindset, however. By putting little bits of information together, some of those bits quite often being so small that no one normally noticed them, she quickly reached a series of conclusions that left her surprised yet again. So you're saying that the queen you used on me not only made me whole and turned me into a devil, it made a connection between us? A one-way connection that lets me know your current emotional state even if you're trying to hide it? 1. With a small grimace, he nodded. She couldn't believe it, and he couldn't blame her. It was a whacked-out theory. Unfortunately, it was the only one they had. Naruto's expression turned serious. I think we should bring this up with the Ajuka Beelzebub. As the creator of the evil peace system, I think he may be the best person to have an answer for us. Ter nodded and slipped out of the bed, heedless still of her naked body. She turned her head this way and that, before asking, Where are some clothes, Naruto-sama? While I don't mind you looking, it would not do for others to see me like this. Stemming a small amount of embarrassment, and covering his eyes with one hand despite knowing he'd never forget that wondrous sight damn teenage hormones, he pointed at a set of double doors that would lead her to a walk-in closet filled with women's clothing. This was originally Lady Kethri's room before she married Gresson, and had used it primarily because of an old tradition where the bride-to-be had to live in her groom's household for a time before the wedding. This is going to be a long day. It was a long ride to Ajuka Beelzebub's laboratory. Thankfully it was made fairly comfortable with the stretch limo that was owned by the Asmodee family, and with Seabass driving the trip was going rather smoothly. The only sticking point at the moment was young Ria's reaction to Tyr. The redhead sat on one side and just stared at the new queen with a blank expression. Naruto could hardly blame the girl either. If for nothing else than that Tyr's choice of clothing was interesting. The blonde woman kept her short, messy hairstyle, complete with 3 braided locks. And that was where the tame ended. Dark blue hakama that rode low on her wide hips, kept up by a thick black belt, and left a fair amount of skin along the outside of the thighs open to the air covered her legs, accompanied by a pair of dark blue thin-soled boots. To complement this, Tyr had donned a small, long-sleeved jacket that barely hid her breasts from view and terminated in attached gloves, with a gray furred collar, too. Naruto didn't know if this was simply what she was comfortable with or if she was purposely teasing him, but he honestly wasn't complaining. And if the amused looks she gave him every time his eyes wandered over her were any indication, then she was fully aware of the effect her outfit was having on him. But seeing the outfit caused him to wonder just what kind of person the late Lady Kethri was, because that certainly wasn't a modest look by any stretch of the imagination. Naruto himself had donned a simple gray pinstripe suit with a white shirt left unbuttoned at the top too. It had become his default outfit whenever he wasn't at home, mostly because Albedo, Yugao, and Konan all agreed that it looked good on him. And if there was one thing he had learned quickly, it was that when more than one of the women in your life, be they romantic partners or not, agreed on something, it was best for his health if he went with it. Really, you chose her for your queen? Naruto sighed, his hand coming up to cover his eyes. This was not the first time Rias had asked this exact question. It seemed the young girl simply could not understand his reasoning. Well, it wasn't really his reasoning, but rather the spell and the piece that chose her, but Rias didn't know that. And quite frankly, Naruto had no intention of telling her that either. It was something she didn't really need to know after all. For the umpteenth time, Rias, yes. Tyr is my new queen, Naruto said, his voice heavy with annoyance. But why her? The girl was persistent, he'd give her that. Rias, Naruto said seriously, one eye peeking out from between his fingers, if you don't drop it, I'm going to be very cross with you. The young devil immediately zipped her lips and sat ramrod straight. Those were not the silver blue eyes she had come to know. No, she saw a glimpse of a murderous slit on a bloody background. Tyr frowned at him in worry, and gently placed a calming hand on his shoulder. She could feel his irritation keenly. It was just shy of actual rage, and she was glad that her silent support managed to calm him down. It was also nice to actually see him show his emotions, unlike her previous boss who always went to great lengths to seem inscrutable and all-knowing. Even if Naruto seemed to be more volatile at the moment, it was nice contrast to Aizen. Naruto drew in a deep breath, and then let it out slowly. All right. Sorry, stressful few weeks so I'm a little on edge. I'm good. And Rias, if you really need to be sure of Tyr's ability to be queen of my peerage, you'll just have to wait and see. Rias nodded hesitantly. But she had to wonder just what that strange eye was about. People's eyes didn't just change like that. And the feeling she'd gotten from it, like if she disobeyed she'd be torn limb from limb, though it also made her think that she had chosen the appropriate style for her new life under him, the traditional white haori, 3, and red hakama of a Japanese miko, 4, both marked with the Asmodee family crest, 5, and finished her look with a traditional hair tie and tabi with waraji, 6. Why did the girl think it was appropriate? Well, it was mostly because a bishop is a high-ranking member of the church, a priest. By becoming one of Naruto's bishop pieces, Rias thought of the irony of at least looking like a Japanese priestess. And she would likely be touting Naruto's saving of her from that wretched contract to any who asked, which may or may not end up sounding like a priest giving a sermon. Shudder, okay, maybe not quite that bad, Rias thought to herself. If nothing else, she found it amusing, and Naruto didn't really mind. Japanese traditional clothing was rather voluminous, and surprisingly warm. So he had no problem if she wanted to wear it. Partly because she wore a simple long skirt and turtleneck inside the mansion for comfort. The three of them fell into a quiet, companionable silence. Awkward, yes, but companionable for all that. The quiet allowed Naruto to slip into a light doze that quickly deepened into real sleep, using Tyr's shoulder as his pillow. Seabass drove very carefully, so there wasn't even so much as a bounce to disturb his passengers. The fact that his new master was riding in the back just made him that much more determined to provide a smooth ride with no trouble. And if trouble found them anyway, well, Seabass was fully prepared to deal with anything shy of God's wrath. A few minutes later, Rias broke the silence by asking a quiet question. Tyr-san, do you know why we're going to meet with Beelzebub-sama? The blonde woman looked at her and gave a small nod. She didn't want to disturb Naruto after all, especially when he looked so peaceful in sleep. Unfortunately, her seemingly indifferent attitude always somewhat irked Rias. Rias gained a small tick mark, but reigned in her annoyance. She didn't want to wake Naruto either, and losing her cool now may bring back those scary red eyes. So she kept her calm and continued in a soft voice. So, why are we going to meet with him? Tyr answered just as softly, to see if there is something wrong with me. What do you mean? Ria's curiosity was piqued. I mean that there seems to be something odd about the queen that was used on me, Tyr explained. It formed a kind of one-way connection between Naruto-sama and myself. I can feel his emotions as if they were my own. The young girl's eyebrows shot up past her messy bangs. You can feel dash? Are you sure it's the piece? Yes. Naruto-sama and I have come to the conclusion that it must be the piece, because prior to my change emotions were. Tyr hesitated for a moment, searching for a safe term to use. Difficult for me. Rias chewed on her lower lip. She had done her study on the evil piece system, of course. As a former heiress, she had been slated for her own set. Not that she couldn't still get one for herself, but it could cause her more trouble than it would be worth. However, she had never come across anything in her reading about any kind of empathic connection being made, one way or otherwise. She recalled the ridiculously detailed wizard-shaped bishop that had been used on her. Could that have had a similar effect? Could her bishop piece from Naruto-sama have done something to her like Tyr's queen piece? Now that she thought about it, her mind did seem much clearer and less flighty than it used to. Like it was easier to focus and remember things, or to analyze. Ria's eyes widened. If her suspicions were true, then it would be not only unprecedented, it could change the very nature of the evil piece system. Come to think of it, the plots of my animes have been getting boringly predictable lately. Still gonna watch them, though. Some of that stuff is just too cool. Ajuka Beelzebub was stumped. He stared at a computer screen with various types of data, all pertaining to the mystery that was Naruto's queen. Running a hand through his slicked-back green hair, musing it slightly, the Mao wondered if it wasn't more the fact that she was a previously unknown species, a hollow she called herself, reacting to the spell inherent in the piece in a unique way instead of something weird with the piece itself. He sighed. I don't know what to tell you, Naruto. There's nothing wrong or strange about the piece inside her. Nor is there something with the bishop you put into young Rias. If I had to point a finger at something strange, I think I'd point it at you. Naruto's eyes widened. Me? Yes. Ajuka nodded firmly. You and that damned Daikoku's blessing. Naruto's sweat dropped and rubbed the back of his head. I forgot about that thing, he muttered. Ajuka snorted. Of course, the moron forgot about one of the most ambiguous sacred gears that existed. Daikoku's blessing was a gear that only showed up in a handful of stories at best throughout the history of the sacred gears. Despite its passive nature, which relegated it to ranks of the low-tier gears, the damn thing gave immense boosts to its wielder's luck in times where they were gambling. The typical stories ended up being about the wielder winning some kind of huge monetary bet. The worst part was that it wasn't stuck to just showing up in the adjacent human world. The stupid gear could pop up anywhere. Rias looked confused. Daikoku's blessing? What's that? Isn't Daikoku the Japanese god of gambling luck? Tyr raised an eyebrow. This was the first she was hearing of anything like this. She resolved to keep her mouth shut, if only so she could learn more. Ajuka nodded distractedly. Yes, he is. However, at some point the biblical asshole thought it would be funny to make a sacred gear based off his ability to grant absurd luck. Naruto here managed to be born with it. The older devil rubbed his forehead. In short, it's not the pieces, it's that damned gear. Tyr-san has said that as a hollow, emotions were difficult for her. And now that she's a devil, she says she lacks the distinctive bone-like armor of her species, as well as some kind of hole? Ajuka looked at the blonde woman and received a nod. I think that what happened is this. When trying to reincarnate her, the piece ran into the problem that a flesh and blood creature would have difficulty with a permanent hole in them, and the gear activated. Using the energy that created the bone armor, which I am hypothesizing is her emotional energy, and filling that hole. This had the unintended result of returning her emotions, her heart in other words, which then latched onto the strongest thing they could find, Naruto. Naruto looked at Tyr and Rias confusedly, receiving confused looks on their parts as well. He rubbed his temples. Ajuka, can we get that dumbed down, please? I believe he's saying that the cause is not so much the piece, but a combination of the piece with my own unique hollow physiology, and your gear's ability to randomly do something, Tyr explained in a quiet monotone. She smiled internally. She was already starting to get control of herself again. While she kind of enjoyed feeling things again, it was also discomforting. Ajuka shivered, that voice creeped him right the fuck out. So, Ria started shyly, it's basically a giant cluster of weird things all happening together? Ajuka nodded, leaning back and crossing his arms. Pretty much, yes. If you're wondering about your own situation, I believe that the bishop took a small portion of Naruto's personality, or his shinobi training, and added it to your own. Huh? Sighing, the Mao shifted in his seat. Naruto comes from a very warlike culture. A wizard, such as the shape of your piece, is an extremely knowledgeable person, and an aged one is even more so. My thoughts are that the piece noted how young you are, and gave you a small bit of Naruto's own mental training and fortitude so you wouldn't be overwhelmed when he starts doing crazy shit. In other words, Naruto interrupted, what you're trying to say is that this is all my fault? Essentially, yes. Ajuka admitted without preamble. He didn't really care what happened, but he'd admit that as a scientist and researcher his curiosity was piqued. Just fantastic, Naruto drawled sarcastically. The older devil sighed, look, based on these two we can assume that each of the types of pieces in your set will do something strange. The queen created an empathic bond. The bishop, wizard if you prefer, granted a measure of mental training. If we look at the others we can probably assume a few things safely. Your knights are in the shapes of unicorns, creatures of light and purity, so we can guess that they may very well pass something of your light or purity onto your eventual members. Naruto nodded then frowned, what about the rook? It's a freaking castle tower on a mountaintop. Ajuka shrugged, my guess? Probably something to do with your own natural defensive strengths. And the pawns? Tyr asked, her curiosity winning out over her normal caution. This man was eccentric, yes, but he was also extremely intelligent, and reminded her of the Primera Espada. Ajuka laughed, dragons, such prideful creatures. I can only guess that whatever they grant will be based on something about Naruto that he prides himself on, at the deepest levels of his subconscious that is. Pride? Tyr raised an eyebrow at her master. Naruto shrugged, I dunno, Tyr-chan. My subconscious self is something of an asshole. He noticed a round of incredulous expressions, and sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. Heh, I kinda met him once or twice. 7. Turning back to Ajuka, Naruto asked, what about